As organizations increasingly rely on data and technology to drive their operations and make informed decisions, the need for professionals who can help bridge the gap between technology and business has grown. And then there comes the business analyst who play a crucial role in helping the organization. As a result, the demand for business analysts with the right mix of technical and business skills is high and is likely to remain so in the future. Hello everyone and welcome to this session. You are currently watching an Edureka Business Analytics Full Course video. By the end of this video, you will have a thorough understanding of business analytics from theory to practical applications. Now, if you love watching videos like these, then subscribe to Edureka's YouTube channel and click the bell button to never miss out any updates from us. Also, if you wish to obtain Edureka's certification course, then please see the link in the description below. Now it's time to begin with our agenda where we'll have a brief overview of what we will cover in this Business Analytics Full Course video. We will start with understanding the current trends and how to become a business analyst. Next, we will see what does a business analyst do. Now, it's time to delve deep into the technical concepts of business analytics. We'll start with the predictive analysis using Python, after which we will work on data analytics using Excel. Next, we will go ahead with understanding the Agile methodology, followed by the Scrum methodology. We will also see how to become a BI analyst. Well, we truly hope that this session assists you in getting jobs in the industry. In order to accomplish this, we will look at some of the important business analytics interview questions with answers. So stick till the end. Now let's start with our session with how to become a business analyst.
Now, getting started with why become a business analyst. Now, first and foremost aspect of becoming a business analyst is looking for job opportunities. So, when it comes to job opportunities, comes with no surprise that there are ample amount of job opportunities all across the world. But having numbers will always help us, right? So, with that, the first number we're going to consider here is for India, which is around 13,000 vacant jobs, while in US there are about 100,000 vacant jobs. Now this includes both for freshers or even experience. Of course, this data is being taken from LinkedIn and Glassdoor, and similarly, which is known as the Silicon Hub in India, Bangalore itself has around 2,000 vacant jobs merely for business analysts, which includes experienced and entry level jobs. And Silicon Hub of the world, perhaps California, has around 4,000 vacant jobs. Again, data as taken by LinkedIn and Glassdoor. Now, similarly, your next question with respect to why you should become a business analyst should be salaries. We have got you covered on that basis as well as an average salary right from entry level to an experience average in India will earn up to 7 lakh per year, and while in US will earn up to 77,000 per year. Now this again is taken by LinkedIn and Glassdoor. Now with these kinds of aspects and data in your hand, why do you want to wait? Just go ahead and start your preparation. Before that, you'll have hundreds of questions to be answered. Now, do not worry because we have got all your doubts to be solved in this video itself. The next thing that you will have is companies hiring. Definitely, there are ample number of companies hiring from basic entry level to experience level. Now, the companies that are hiring are even in product based and service based. Now, they could be high-end companies such as IBM, Deloitte, Capgemini, Oracle, Accenture, and to any of the startups as well. Now, these are some of the companies that I've mentioned here. There are many more adding on to this list. With that said, how to become a business analyst? Well, there are many aspects again to consider. First being the job description. Now, in job description, you can see what exactly a company or a recruiter is looking for in you as a business analyst. Firstly, I've considered a Amazon job description. Here, Amazon is looking for almost entry level business analyst itself with just at least 1 year of experience. Now, with this, you can see in the highlighted portions that Amazon is basically looking for a highly advanced proficiency in SQL, Microsoft Excel, statistical analysis. He might also be looking for a person who is well versed in data visualization tools such as Tableau or even Power BI here, QuickSight. And he must be good in identifying and accessing relevant data with extremely powerful insights on analysis and to draw conclusions. So, from this, we can draw a gist that for becoming a business analyst in Amazon, as per this job description, he needs to be good in SQL, at least know few tools of Microsoft, good in data analysis, use Tableau or any such data analytical tools, statistic analysis as well. Similarly, why don't we look at one of the other descriptions to understand better? Here I've considered IBM, and again in IBM, as you can see, SQL is predominantly asked. The next thing is basic programming languages along with again Microsoft tools. Data modeling and modeling techniques are something else that's been asked in IBM here. Drawing conclusions out of this is again SQL, Microsoft tools, data modeling, programming languages here. Now, if you can see in the first statement, daily scrum handling is also an important job of a business analyst. We'll come to that later in this session today. The next thing that we're going to do is we'll look at one more final job description to draw another conclusion so that we have clear cut idea of as to what a business analyst should be well versed in. Here I've considered Oracle, where they are looking for a project accounting, project setup maintenance, analyzing data, support and closely work with project team. Everything is related with a project. Now you can analyze here that a business analyst is a business analyst with respect to a project and with respect to a business. Now that depends on what company is hiring you. So here, considering a project, the skills that one needs here is project management, Microsoft tools and data analysis. Again, common are Microsoft tools and data analysis. Now with all these skills kept in mind, we can draw some conclusions which are the skills required to become a business analyst. Now here in this slide, that's what we are going to focus on. From the job descriptions that we just went through, we saw that SQL or any other database concepts are something that is very, very important. Now, knowing SQL is very important as SQL itself helps in understanding the data, writing queries as a business analyst. The next thing is Microsoft tools. Now, if you are an experienced candidate and you're switching careers towards business analyst, it is an added advantage for you as we as IT professionals would have come across one or the other or three even Microsoft tools in a regular basis. So this is an easier aspect for us. So knowing Excel in a advanced manner will always help you in approaching towards business analysis. The next thing is analytical skills, which is a very important aspect for a business analyst. Now, we saw in one of the job description that programming skills is also needed. Of course, you don't have to write codes here. It is not a core technical job anyway. So knowing basics of programming language will also help. As you know, business analysts do not have to do any core technical coding here. So knowing basics of programming language will also help him. Now, if you are from a technical background, then if you have a little coding knowledge also will come in handy. The next thing is statistical analysis. Now, knowing statistical analysis is quite important as a business analyst, he needs to run through all the data related documents or any kind of information which involves statistical decision making. The next thing is program management skills. Now, all these skills that I'm discussing here are actually the skills which you have training in on our website. Now, if you go to edureka.co, you will find there is course for Microsoft Excel, there is course for analytical skills, any kind of programming language, or even project management. There is a certification that you can get in PMP as well. So, as a business analyst, like I was saying, project management is one of the basic skills that you need to know: how to manage a project, what is the problem statement, how to satisfy the customer, what exactly do the stakeholders keep in mind, everything from end to end. You need to know. The next thing is Scrum management. Now, when a particular project is being started, from the person who is a developer, who is an investor, who is the client, who is the end user, everyone needs to be on the same page. For this, Scrum is very important. You need to manage what is going on today, what is going to be tomorrow, everything. And this, who does this, is business analyst. So Scrum management is an important skill that is to be needed by a business analyst. Next thing is data visualization tools such as Tableau, Power BI, any such things. With that, we should understand the trends right now we have in business analysis. The first thing, according to 2020, Agile was extremely unavoidable. Now, Agile technique was not even implemented until probably 2020. Of course, there were companies which were using also, but then predominantly they were not implemented. So then, after 2020, they realized that Agile is something that every business or every company using business analyst should implement Agile technique. And then our prime focus is customers. As well said saying says that customers are the king, and hence our focus should be on customers. The next thing is obviously visual thinking superpowers for product owners. Now, as a product owner, it is important that they estimate everything related to the product. Now, it is important to have your visual aspect, visual power with respect to product, as even the client needs to understand what your product is all about. Now, mind you, we are also one among the product owners. By we, I mean business analyst. Now, taking product centric approach. Like I said, customer is the king, product is the queen. Now, with customer and product being the centric, any kind of business can reach towards the end. That said, data driven forward planning. Now, every data from who is the owners, who is the client, or who is the end user, anything should be put into data, and every day our work should be with respect to that, and planning should be made with respect to the data that we have in hand, and this is where our data driven approach or planning comes into picture. Finally, we need to understand that cybersecurity is something that every business, every company, be it big or small, must have. And business analyst, because this person keeps everything in account, will always help you towards cybersecurity and maintaining the security of your data. Now, data security is very important, be it you are in a sensitive business or an open business as well. That being understood, some of the tools a business analyst uses in order to perform his analysis is modern requirements for DevOps, ClickUp, Smartsheet, Adobe Acrobat, Blueprint, Jira Core, SmartDraw, and many others. Now, these are the tools that are mainly and predominantly used in most of the businesses, top core businesses per se. Now, there are many more tools. If you look up on the internet, probably you'll get. You can go on and learn about any of them if that interests you. Now, learning at least one will help you and come in handy as a business analyst.
Who is a business analyst? So, a business analyst is somebody who bridges the gap between internal IT team and the business using data analytics to assess processes, determine requirements, and deliver data-driven recommendations, and finally present reports to executives and stakeholders. So let's break that down a little bit, shall we? First, a business analyst is a person who stands between the internal IT team and the client that has certain requirements. So a business analyst understands those requirements, whatever it may be, to build an app, to get an insight on what direction their business should take, whatever it may be. They understand all of the requirements for the clients and they act as a proxy for the clients and help the IT team develop the results that are going to be satisfactory for the client that will help the client make data-driven decisions, and that is exactly what a business analyst is. So now you might ask yourself, well, that is all nice and dandy, but what do they actually do in order to accomplish that? So let's use an example of Stuart, who is a business analyst working for an application development firm. And so that's the business analyst. And let's take a look at the client. So the client in this example is Martha, who is an IT manager at a modern hospital who is tasked with making a mobile application that allows its customers to make appointments, consult doctors, view their medical reports and receipts, and make payments for hospital bills through their online account, all without having to wait in line, which is so much of a discomfort and inconvenience for patients. So Martha thinks instead of hiring a whole team to make this application, she's just going to approach a company that is going to help her with this. So Martha approaches Stuart's company to see if they can help her with making the app. That's where she meets Stuart, who's been assigned to work on Martha's project from start to finish. Martha discusses the vision behind the app, and Stuart probes Martha to form a picture of what the final product should be like. He assures Martha that he will take it from here and deliver the product as per requirements, budget, and time frame. But how does he do all of that? Well, let's find out. So in this section, we will attempt to understand the roles and responsibilities of a business analyst by using the same example of Stuart and Martha. Okay, so let's get started. So first thing that Stuart has to do is to understand the vision behind the app, what Martha and the hospital are trying to achieve with this app. Here he understands properly what the motives behind making these applications are. Next, he gathers all the requirements from Martha by asking her the appropriate questions about the apps. He does this so that he can understand what the app should look like and how it should function. So he coordinates with Martha to gather all the functional requirements like features and how they function, customer data security, payment system, automatic assistant on the app, etc. And non-functional requirements like look and feel of the app. After he documents all of this, he then allots resources. So what does that mean? He assigns the various parts of the projects to respective teams, such as the development team, the user experience and user interface team, and so on, and finalizes all the tools and software they're going to need for the project, keeping in mind the budget of the client, of course, and the time frame. So the project has been delegated to appropriate parties and they are all off to races in order to finish the project. And so his next duty is to make sure that he tracks the progress and offers recommendation. So what do I mean by that? So as the project develops, he monitors its progress to make sure that the client's needs are addressed. He also makes useful suggestions to improve the project and points out corrections to make if needed in order to make sure that clients' needs are met. But not only that, he also conducts meetings between Martha and the assigned teams to discuss and decide on how to rectify the issues quickly. Making an application is a complex process, so there are bound to be mistakes that are happening and issues to be cropping up. So, to iron them out, he conducts meetings so everybody is on the same page. This also ensures that Martha is always in the loop and knows how the project is coming along. So let's say they worked hard and a prototype is ready. So once it is ready, he begins user testing and after thorough testing collects their feedback. This helps with improvement, correction, and finalization of the product. This also helps with deciding whether the app has met the client's expectations. It gives an idea on improvements and corrections to make, which are communicated to the development team, and this cycle continues until a deliverable product is ready. So the prototype has been through a few iterations of corrections and improvement, and now is finally looking ready. So now what Stuart does is he analyzes the gathered data of the app and uses data visualization tools like Tableau, Power BI to make reports that provide insight on the app's performance. These reports could be as simple as charts in a document explaining the data, or could be in form of dashboard with multi-dimensional visual reports based on key performance indicators of the app. Or, outside this example, it could be used to portray business sales figures, employee performance, and endless other possibilities. But stay with me, let's stick to this example. After analyzing the data and generating reports and putting it in a nice visual form, now Stuart can move on to the last part of the project. Finally, the project is complete. Stuart documents all pertinent information about projects such as app documentation, like how to use it, maintenance processes, and so on, along with the findings and reportings after testing. Stewart presents all of this to Martha and other stakeholders from the hospital and give them a walkthrough of the whole app and explains the reports. And so now is the product delivery time. Stewart carried out all his roles and responsibilities in Martha's project and is ready to deliver the hospital health app to her on time and in budget. Martha, her CTO, and the hospital are all happy with the app. It will help their customers and staff immensely.
Let us understand what exactly predictive analysis is. So what is predictive analysis? Predictive analytics or analysis encompasses a variety of statistical techniques from data mining, predictive modeling, and machine learning that actually analyze the current and historical facts to make predictions about future or otherwise unknown events. So this is the basic definition from Wikipedia. So we basically use the previously collected data to predict an outcome or an event. So typically, historical data is used to build a mathematical model. In our case, we can call it a classifier or a predictive model or a regressor, which actually captures the important trends. And then the current data is used on that model to predict what will happen next or to suggest actions to take optimal outcomes. So let us take a look at various applications where we can actually use predictive analysis. So we can use predictive analysis for a lot of things. First of all, we have campaign management. So let's say we have a campaign, we have to figure out what kind of audience will be there or what kind of our target audience is. So we can analyze the previous data of our previous campaigns that we might have managed previously. And according to that, we can figure out some suggestions or, the course of action that we have to take. So this is one campaign management that we can do using the predictive analysis. Or for recent examples, let's say an election campaign, a lot of people are gathering a lot of data of previous elections, like how it happened and what are the major factors that led to the winning of some so and so person. So this is how we can use predictive analysis in campaign management. Then there is customer acquisition. So we can analyze the whole business and we can figure out different points to figure out what kind of task or events we can actually produce in order to make our business better so that we'll be able to make customer acquisition better. And then we have budgeting and forecasting as well. Similarly, taking a look at previous data, we can finalize some budget and forecast few related pointers. For example, we have stock prediction using Python or any other language such as R also. And then we have fraud detection, so we can manage a lot of data. Like for credit card companies, they make use of hundreds and hundreds of users, and they analyze the data to predict or detect the fraudulent transactions in their data. And then there is promotions as well, so we can analyze the target audience. We can follow the trends, like they are following the types of content they're actually going for. And then similarly, you can make promotions according to that. Then there's pricing also, like you can figure out, let's say you have a supermarket, somewhat like what Walmart does. So you have all the pricing and everything. So what you can do is figure out the price of a product after several time based on the recent purchases and also the recent scenario or the previous historical data upon which the price has been distributed accordingly. And you can also plan for the demand as well using the predictive analysis. So these are a few applications that I can think of right now. And these are only a few applications where you can use predictive analysis to predict for example, I'll talk about football, guys. So let's say if you have a favorite player and in the next season you want to see how much price he might go for in certain other clubs. So you can make use of the data at your bay, and depending on the purchases that happen in previous seasons or the windows, you can actually figure out somewhat around what kind of price your favorite player is going to go for. So that is one example I can think of right now. So these are a few applications of predictive analysis. Now let's move on to the next topic of the session, guys, which is steps involved in predictive analysis. So this is a very important concept in this session, guys. So you have to fully understand what kind of steps that goes in while you're doing a predictive analysis. So the first step has to be a data exploration. So what you have to do is gather data, upload it into your program. Then you have to take a look at your data in a perspective which will clear certain things for you. Like you have to figure out what kind of data you're dealing with, what are the columns, what are the features that you have inside your data, what kind of data it is, how many numerical values are there, what kind of data types are there inside your data, is it a CSV file or not, so on. So you have to figure out a lot of things while data exploration. And after that, you can figure out how to clean your data. By cleaning, I mean you have to figure out the redundancies that might hinder your model. So for that, you have to check for null values, you have to check for missing values, and then you have to figure out what kind of columns will be actually better if you put them inside your model, and what are the redundant variables, like what kind of columns that you can actually remove and will not make a difference in your model. So that covers the data cleaning part. And then there is modeling, where you have to model your or you have to select your predictive model, guys. So there are a lot of models that you can go for, but in this session I'm going to use the linear regression model because it's the very simple or the basic one, so that the beginners also will be able to learn it properly. After modeling, you have to check for the evaluation, or you have to check for the accuracy, how your model is actually performing. So let's talk about these steps in a little more detailed way. So we'll talk about data exploration first of all. As I've already told you, data exploration is gathering your data and then taking a look at your data in a perspective that will clear a lot of things. For example, you will be able to see the number of columns, number of rows. You will have a description of all the data types, what kind of variables are there. You will have the mean values, the average values, minimum values, and you can also check for unique values in your columns as well. So this all comes in data exploration. And after this, the second step is data cleaning. And I've already told you guys, data cleaning is basically getting rid of redundancies in your data, which includes the missing values, which may hinder. And you have to make sure that your model is not going to cause overfitting or underfitting due to the noise. And noise is basically irrelevant data that may be in the form of null values. So you have to make sure you get rid of them or replace them with average values in the column. And then there is redundancies like outliers, which are not necessarily required in your model, so you can remove them as well. So this is all about data cleaning. And then we have the third step, which is modeling. So for data modeling, first of all, you have to understand the relationship between the variables in your model so that you'll figure out what kind of model you're going to go for. So for example, if let's say if you have a target variable, in our case, which will be a price of certain goods. So let's say you have to figure out the relationship between variables. So if you're going for linear regression, you have to make sure that the relationship is continuous. And let's say if you are going for logistic regression, it is important that you go for continuous variables. The target variable although has to be dichotomous, or what you call it, categorical, which is like, let's say if I'm trying to predict something using the logistic regression, the answer would probably be yes or no, or be 1 or 0, something like that. But in case of linear regression, we have to make sure that there is some continuous relationship between the variables, which is my target variable and my independent variables. Taking a look at the fourth part, or the fourth step and the final step, is performance analysis. So after you're done making a model, so you have to perform certain analysis, which is, checking the accuracy of the model and making sure that it's above 70. I mean, if you're a beginner and if you are trying to make your first prediction model, anything above 70% accuracy score is very good, guys. But I would suggest that if you are working on a good model and if you want your model to be good, the accuracy should be ranging around 0.9, which is more than 90%. And if you get it the first time, it's well and good. But it solely depends on your data and the kind of model selection that you do. So let's take a look at the next topic in our session, guys. So this is basically where I'm going to perform predictive analysis using Python on a data set. So I have a problem statement in which I have a data set which has certain values or certain variables, which has columns like, how many bedrooms does a house have, and what kind of square feet it is grabbing, and all these things that I'll show you in the data. And using that data, I am going to predict the house of a price. So let's take it up to Jupyter Notebook, guys, and I'll show you what I'm going to do over there. So I have a Jupyter Notebook over here, guys. And if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebook, guys, I suggest you to check out our tutorial on YouTube. We have a Jupyter Notebook tutorial. You will be able to learn it properly. I mean, there's not really so much to learn in Jupyter Notebook. It's quite easy. That is why I'm using also. And we have a cheat sheet as well, so you can go for that. So first of all, I'm going to import some dependencies. So for the first step, that is data exploration, I have to get the data. So for that, I'm going to use the pandas library, and I'll import a few other libraries as well. Like I'm going to use the cbon to check the relationship between the variables, basically for EDA, exploratory data analysis. And if you guys don't know what EDA is, I suggest you to check out another tutorial, which is exploratory data analysis, that we have on our YouTube channel. And then I'm going to import NumPy as well, just in case. All right. And you can see, guys, I have to just press shift and enter, and this is why I'm using a Jupyter Notebook, because the implementation is very easy, and I can segregate my data or the code in different cells. So I'm importing this and I can just make it, okay, I'll make it a little bigger so that it's visible to you, everyone. What I can do is I can comment a part, let's say installing dependencies, and it is in a separate cell. So that makes it quite descriptive when you're coding, and when you are trying to figure out what's wrong in your code, it helps actually. So after this, what you have to do is I'll have to import the data. For that, I'm going to use the read CSV module, which is basically going to go to the file and read my data, guys. The name of the file is house.csv. We have a truncated error. All right, so guys, I have to show you something. So usually when you do this, when you copy the file location, you get that Unicode error. But let's see if I change these backslashes to forward backslashes, what happens? Do I still get the error or not? Okay, we have right. So I was doing something wrong here. So this is one exercise for you guys. Like earlier when I was using the backward backslashes, I was getting a Unicode error, but when I change it to the forward backslashes, I'm not getting that error. So this is one question for you guys. Tell me why you think it happened in the comment sections below. Now moving on, I'll take the first look at my data, guys. So I'll just use the head method to get my first data. So these are the first 5 rows in my data, guys. So I have ID, we have date, the price is there, bedrooms, we have bathrooms, square feet living and square feet lot, we have floors as well. Waterfront is 0, okay, it has to be 0 and 1, I guess. There is view, then grade, square feet above. So these are the columns that I have inside my data, guys. So I'll check the last 5 rows as well. For that, I'm using the tail method. So as you can see, you can get the first look of your data using the data.head and data.tail method. After that, I check the columns of my data, and let's check the shape as well, guys, so that we'll know what we're dealing with. Okay, it's not callable. All right, so we have 21,613 entries with 21 columns. Okay, it's a quite big data set, and let me tell you guys, this is one data set that I found on Kaggle, and it's very easy to find the house dataset, and I'm using this example of house dataset because it's very common, and to find this dataset is very easy. You go on to Kaggle and you just look for house prediction datasets, and it will show you a lot of datasets that you can download there from. Okay, so you can find the dataset on Kaggle, guys. Now we have checked the shape as well. Okay, I'll use one more method, that is data.describe. All right, this is callable. All right, so we have all these numerical values, and using the describe method, we can get the 50% minimum, maximum, and the standard deviation. We can get the mean value and the count as well. So let's say for bedrooms, the mean value is 3. The most common entry in the bedroom section is a 3-bedroom house. And then for bathrooms also is a 2-bathroom house. Square feet is almost 2079 square feet. And then for maximum values, we have even a 33-bedroom house as well, and we have a house with 8 bathrooms, and the square feet is 13,540. All right, so minimum value is we have a 0-bedroom house. Okay, that's going to be something else, and square feet 290. So this is how you use the describe method, and this is the first step, guys. I am trying to do the data exploration. Now after this, I think I'm pretty sure about what kind of data I'm dealing with. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move on to the next step, that is checking for the relationship between these variables. So for that, I'm going to use the data visualization, and I'm going to use a few plot points using the cbon library. And if you don't know about cbon, we have a YouTube tutorial on cbon library as well, so you can find out different kinds of plots that you can use for data visualization. And data visualization is nothing but it's a process where you can visualize your data and you can try to figure out the relationship between the variables. Before that, I want to check for null values or missing values because I don't want to get any hindrance in my data set while I'm modeling. So first of all, you have to do check for null values, and let's get a sum as well. So we have 0, almost okay. So we have no null values in this data set. So usually if you find a null value and if it's a big data set, and let's say if all these values are, let's say 2000, and if you have 10 missing values, you can just remove those 10 values. But if there are more null values, I suggest you to replace them with the mean value. And to find out the mean value, you can just go over here. Let's say if you have let's say if you're checking for bedrooms, how many null values are there, and let's say there are 500 out of 21,000. So you can just replace the 0 with this value, which is 3. And similarly for any other column, you can do the same using the mean value. So since there are no null values inside this data set, because it's a very clean data set that I downloaded it from Kaggle, so we're going to move on to the next step, which is visualization. And mind you guys, this is the step in my data exploration part and the data cleaning part, not the other steps that we use for predictive analysis. All right. So I have no null values, but there are a few redundancies that I want to get rid of. I'll talk about that later, guys. First of all, I'm going to use a relation plot. X, I'll use, okay, so I want to check, or my basic aim is to predict the price of the house. All right. So for X, I'll just take price, and let's check the relationship between these variables. So I'll check for bedroom. All right, kind is equal to, okay, we'll not use kind, data is equal to data. Okay, all right, so I think we can, like, almost, there are so many, I mean, so this is one relationship that I'm getting over here. Price is not very clear, but we are getting the relationship of the bedrooms, or the most common bedrooms, so which is around over here, that is 0 to 5. And similarly I can check for other variables as well, like bathrooms. See guys, so the price is actually increasing with the number of bathrooms, but it's not necessarily same for everything. So there has to be some other dependencies as well, because as we can see, since the bathrooms are pricing, price is not actually rising that much. Okay, I'll just copy this. For bedrooms, the price is actually increasing pretty much with each bedroom. I mean, not really. If we take a look at 10 bedrooms also, the price is pretty much the same. So there's not one decisive factor I can think of for this. All right, so we'll check for some other as well. So we'll check for square feet living. So this is one linear relationship that I'm seeing over here, guys. So with each square feet rising, most of the prices are actually in this area only, like from 0 to 40, 400,000 or 40 million actually. But we can see that it's a linear relationship. With each increasing square feet, the price is actually rising. So this is one thing that has to be there inside our train set. I'll tell you what a train set actually is. Then there is floor as well. We can check for floors. All right. Okay, so floors is actually pretty descriptive over here. So for most of the values are in the 2 floors area, and then we can check for waterfront as well. Okay, we can do one thing. I'll tell you one trick. So we'll add the hue over here, and this is going to be waterfront. So with the houses which actually has a waterfront are in oranges, and the other ones are in blue So you can see the relationship between them. And similarly, I can use other. Okay, so let's say latitude and longitude. So you can figure out the relationship between the variables using the visualization. So for me, I think in this data set, to get the price out, we're going to have to use bedrooms, bathrooms. There has to be square feet. A lot of square feet has to be there. Floors also we can get, and then what view, front view we'll use. Square feet we have to use, and year built and year renovated we can leave it out from the train set. And zip code also we don't actually need. Latitude and longitude are also not decisive in prediction, because we can use it for visualization and we can actually get the picture over there. And square feet living is actually important. So these are the redundancies that I was talking about inside your model. So now we'll move on to the modeling part, guys. So what I'll do now is I'll import a few dependencies, guys. So from sklearn. So first of all, I have to import the linear regression from linear models. And I'm going to import linear regression. All right, so I'll import the model selection, import train test split. All right. So first thing that I have to do is I have to segregate my data into a training set and a test set. So I'll do one thing, guys. Right. So I'll get my data in this cell. So two things that I don't actually need inside my data are date, because I'll get the training data, or I'll write it as train. So which is going to be data, and I'm going to drop a few columns. So I'll have to drop, so I have to drop a few columns. So first of all, I have to drop price, because it cannot be in my training set since I'm going to predict it. And then there has to be ID. We don't actually need it. And then I'm going to drop date as well. There's not really a prove a lot of things over here. So for now, I'll just remove all these columns. And for our test set, or the dependent variable, let's say I'm going to take the variable as a test, let's say. And for this, I'm going to use data dot, or we need actually just one column, that is price. Right, method object is not subscriptable. I'm sorry, I made a syntax error over here, guys. I have to add the axis as well. Now it's fine, guys. So now what I will do is I'm going to segregate my data into X train, X test, Y train, and Y test. And now I'm going to use the train test split method. So first we have train, then we have test, we have test size, which is, let's say, 0.3, and we have the random state is equal to, let's say, 2. Right, so we have made our xtrain and xtrain method. Now I'll use one variable, let's say regr regressor, and now I'm going to call my linear regression model. It's made, guys. So now I'm going to use the fit method to fit my xtrain and y train data, guys. The training data I have to fit. Right, we have no errors here, guys. After this, I can just okay, I'll take one variable, let's say predict, and regr dot predict x test and y test. All right, wait a second, guys, I'm sorry. So now the modeling part is done, guys. So I'll explain what I've done over here. I took the linear model, which is linear regression, and then for segregating my data into training and testing set, I'm using the train test split. Before that, I segregated the data for my model, inside which I'm using the training set, which has all the values from the data set except price, ID, and date. So I've removed these 3 columns because I thought these are redundant for my model right now. And the variable that I'm going to predict over here is the price. So I'm taking that alone. So after that, I use the train test split method to actually separate the data into training and test set. And then I call the linear regression model over here. Using the regression model, I'm fitting the training data. And after that, I am using it to predict a value. So now comes the part where we have to check the efficiency of the model. So for regression models, it is very easy, guys. You can just check the score. For this, you have to provide a few values, X test and Y test. And we have the accuracy of 0.70, which is not bad, guys. If you're using the model or the data set this big, it is quite predictable, get this kind of accuracy, but you can do something else to improve the accuracy. I mean, you can look at the data and remove all the values that you find will help you into improving your accuracy. Like you can remove latitude, longitude, you can remove zip code, a year renovated, year built, that you can actually remove waterfront and view as well, or keep only a few values that you actually need, which is bedrooms, bathrooms, I think, and everything related to square feet. That if you keep in your training set, then it's going to be a higher accuracy for you guys. All right, so now that we are done with the session, guys, I want to give you a exercise sort of which you can do for practicing this. So I have used the linear regression model over here. So I want you to do one thing, guys. Check out other classifiers and regressor models that you can use to predict a value. I mean, we have a tutorial on all of them on our YouTube channel, and see if you can use the same data to make a prediction model using other classifiers like a random forest classifier. Then we have a decision tree. Then you can use logistic regression for this as well. I mean, if you have continuous data, then you can go for linear regression. But if you find a categorical data, let's say we have waterfront or not, so you can check for that as well.
To start with, we are going to start with the statistical functions. The first one is average function. What does the average function do? It's an inbuilt function in Excel that is categorized as statistical function. Average does exactly what it says and works similar to sum. It will return the average value of the given series of numbers in Excel. Let's say we need to identify the average salary paid to the employees in the organization. Where is our salary data? In the H column. So what I'll do is I'll enter the average function followed by the open bracket. In the cell, we need the result. In our case, it is J2. So I start with an equal to, I enter average, open the bracket. Now I'll have to select the range of cell for which I need the average. And in our case, it is the salary column, which is H to H. I close the bracket and press enter. I get the average salary as 15,538. This is the average amount paid to each of the employees in the organization. The next function in our list is the median function. The median function is again a statistical function which returns the median of a given number. What is median? It is a middle number in the set of numbers. That means if I have 10, 12, and 15. So there are three numbers that I have. I have to identify the middle number from this. So is equal to, I'll use the median function here just to identify what is the middle number, and then select the range of cells that has numbers, close the bracket, enter. It will give me the middle number, which is 12 in our case, because it is not the highest, it is not the lowest, but the middle value. The same goes if I want to know what is the middle value in the salary column. I'll use the median function in cell L2 is equal to median, open the bracket, select our salary column, which is H to H, close the bracket and enter. 15,750 is the middle value of the salary column. Next we're going to see is the mode function. The Excel mode function returns the most frequently occurring numbers in the numeric data set. This function only works with numbers. It will identify amount or the number that occurs maximum time in the range of cells. So for example, here we have the basic salary where I can see the highest number is 49,000, and then there are few employees earning the same salary, but I want to identify which salary is being earned maximum time by the employees. So I can use the mode function as equal to mode, open the bracket. It is only mode. Select mode, open the bracket, and then select H to H column because I want to know from the salary column. Close the bracket. 17,500 is the amount that occurs maximum time in this cell ranges. Moving on to the next one is the standard deviation function. What is a standard deviation? It's a formula is to identify the standard deviation of the set of numbers. The standard deviation function calculates the standard deviation in the sample set of data. Standard deviation is a measure of how much variance there is in a set of numbers compared to the average of the numbers. Standard deviation .s function is meant to estimate standard deviation in a sample. If the data represents an entire population, use the standard deviation .p function. So we will look at a standard deviation sheet. Here I have a sample data. So sample of few students have been picked up who have scored a particular number or a particular marks in the different subjects. So we have taken a sample and we have not picked up all the student data. So if we are using it for a sample only, we will use the standard deviation, which is standard deviation .s. It estimates standard deviation based on the sample. Ignores logical value and text in the sample, so it has to be only numbers. Okay, so it's standard deviation .s when you have a sample data where you just want to identify how much variance is there as compared to the average, you will use the standard deviation .s. But if you have a full population, that means if you have all the marks of all the students in the school or the college, you will have to use standard deviation .p, which is also there here. Calculates the standard deviation based on the entire population given as an argument. But here we are using the standard deviation for a sample data. So I select that, and then for which I need a standard deviation, I'll just go and select that particular range. I close the bracket, I press enter. It is giving me 4.89, which is a standard deviation value for that scores. So this is how your standard deviation works. Next function that we are going to see in our list when we are going through our function list is our large function. What does a large function do? Large function returns the nth largest value from the sample. For example, if I go back to my data where I have the salary data or the employee salary list, I have to identify what is the highest salary that I'm paying. I can do it by using the sort and function, but it can be that as of now I have sorted this data, but later on this person has Asha Trivedi has moved to a different department. Director Sheetal Desai has left, and Asha Trivedi has moved into being in the board of directors list. Not only Asha, we have also identified Bharat to move into the board of directors. So now we have two board of directors, but both their salaries will be a little different. Say I will change the board of directors salary to 51,000 for Bharat, and for Asha Trivedi it is about 60,000. So this is the salaries that we have decided for the board of director, which are two board of directors. Now, in this case, if I have to see the first value, first find out what was the largest value in the salary section without changing the two values that I had now. So is equal to large, open the bracket, I'll select the array which is our salary, and K, when I say, what does the K mean? K mean I have to tell which highest number. That means if I want to know the first highest value or the first largest value from the list, I can put the number as 1. But if I don't want to know the first largest, I want to know the second largest salary paid to the employee, I will press number 2. Close the bracket, enter. Now if you see, our largest value is actually 49,000. However, the answer that you get is 24,500. Why? Because we are looking at the second largest value in the range of cells. If I am looking at fifth largest value, I'll put it as 5 and press enter. It will give me the fifth largest value in the set of cells, so which is 22,750. Like in our example where I mentioned that Asha Trivedi is now moving to the board of directors. Let's not remove Sheetal Desai for now. She's still there in the board of directors. We also move Asha Trivedi to the board of directors list, and this time the board of directors salary that I'm moving to is 60,000. So when I say the board of directors salary is 60,000, when I move this salary now and say that which is the first largest salary, the first largest salary will be 60,000. The second largest salary will be 49,000 instead of 24,500. Why? Because now there is even one more larger salary. The first largest salary has become Asha's salary, which is 60,000. Earlier it was 49,000 was the largest. So this way, if you keep on changing anybody else's salary, say I make it to 65,000 just to get a gist of how it works. You will see that earlier it was 49,000 was the largest. Now the 60,000 has become the largest salary or the second largest salary. Same goes with the small. I am trying to identify what is the smallest salary that I'm paying or the lowest salary that I'm paying to the employee. Now, again, I have to give the K value. Now, K value, again, like I said, it will be the value of which smallest number that you want. Is it the first smallest that you want to know? Is it the second smallest that you want to know or the lowest that you want to know? Is it the third that you want to know? So according to what is your requirement, you can put the number there as, say if I put 2, so it will give me the second lowest salary paid to the employees in the organization, which is 7,000. If I make the lowest salary as even more lower, so let's see what is our lowest salary. It is 5,950. Let's make one of them to 5,500. What will happen is now if I go back and see the second lowest salary value, it is now 5,950 because the first has now changed to 5,500. So depending on how your value is, which is your lowest salary, it will automatically calculate and give you that number. So moving on to the next one, which is our correl. What is correl? Or it is the correlation, you can say. We can use the correlation function in Excel to find the correlation coefficient between the two variables. I'm sure we have all learned coefficient correlations in our college days when we were doing maths in the college. If you had opted for maths in college, you would have done the correlation coefficient. However, if you're not done it, which is not a big deal, the Excel is already doing it for you. Correlation coefficient formula are used to find out how strong a relationship is between the two data. Like here in our case, the relation between the age and the relation between the glucose level of the person. Is it that the age increases and the glucose level increases, or is it that the age decreases and the glucose level decreases, or is it that the age increases and glucose level decreases and vice versa? So depending, we are trying to understand what is the relationship. Formula always returns a value between -1 and 1. What is the relationship of -1 and 1? Why is it always giving you in -1 and 1? And how is it bifurcated or split? If your relationship is 1 or close to 1, rather I would say 0 to 1, it would indicate a strong positive relationship. A correlation coefficient of 1 means that for every positive increase in one variable, there is a positive increase of a fixed proportion in the other. For example, shoe sizes go up in perfect correlation with the foot length. So when your foot length increases, your shoe sizes increases. So it's a proper correlation. That is when your one correlation, it is exactly how much your foot sizes increases, your shoe sizes increases. If the correlation coefficient is -1, it indicates a strong negative relationship. A correlation coefficient of -1 means that for every positive increase in one variable, there is a negative decrease of the fixed proportion in the other. For example, the amount of gas in the tank decreases in perfect correlation with the speed. Every time the amount of gas in the tank decreases of your car. So when you're running the car, if you're increasing the speed, your gas keeps on decreasing. Why? Because you're increasing the speed. So the gas is getting used or your fuel is getting used. And that's the reason the fuel is decreasing, but your speed is increasing. So there is an opposite reaction. Fuel decreases, but your speed increases. That's how your coefficient correlationship works if in case of -1. If the result is 0, it indicates no relationship at all. 0 means that for every increase, there isn't a positive or negative decrease. The two just aren't related. Anything that is 0, no relation at all. 1, where there is a positive relation. That means with the increase, the other part will also increase. While with -1, it is the opposite side. With one increase, the other one will decrease. That's the three differences that you will see. Of course, you will not get the result as 1, -1 or 0. It will be in between. So we will try and understand that if it is between 0 to 1, then it is a positive one. If it is between -1 to 0, then it is -1. And if it is 0, then it is no relation at all. So let's see an example in our sheet where I have the age considered as the X value, age of the person, and then I have the glucose level of that person as considered as Y. We are just trying to identify what is the relationship between the human age and the glucose level in their body. So if you see the human age, the X level, it says 43, the glucose level goes to 99. 21, the glucose level shows a 65. But does it make sense by just looking at it? Because we can't identify what is the relationship. Is it -1, is it 1, or is it 0? So to identify that, I can use a function called correlation function, which is correl in Excel, in the cell where I need this result. So is equal to correl, open the bracket, and then I will select the different arrays for which I need to identify the relation. So first relation that I have to identify for is the age. So I will see that age against glucose level. So the age is sitting in B2 to B7. So I'll select that as the first array. The second array is C2 to C7. So I select that second array, which is C2 to C7, and close the bracket. Press enter. It is giving me a value as 0.53 if I remove more decimal places that I have. So our answer is 0.53, which is a positive result. That means there is a close relationship between the age and the glucose level. When it is positive, it means that the increase in age does increase the glucose levels in the body. If this was a negative point, then it would have been the other way around. That increase in age reduces the glucose level in the body. So this is how your correlation function works. Let's see another example that we have on a sheet, which is a correlation function. We have the price of the stock A that changes, or the percentage change in the price of stock A. And then we also have S&P 500 weekly change, or the percentage change of S&P 500. The S&P 500 is a stock market index that tracks the stocks of 500 large cap US companies. It represents the stock market's performance by reporting the risk and returns of the biggest companies. So what are we doing here is we are identifying if there is any relationship between the S&P change and the stock A change. So if there is a relationship, they will be able to take a proper decision in the future when they are making some investments. So to start with, I am going to find out the correlation. So I'll do is equal to correl, open the bracket. Now we have two set of data, which is two arrays. So I'll select the first array as this one, which is C5 to C24, comma, the second array will be D5 to D24. I close the bracket, I press enter, you will see that it is very close to 1. So it is 0.89, or rather 0.9. This means that every time there is a 1% increase in the S&P 500, then there is 1% increase in the stock A prices. Similarly, if there is a decrease in the S&P 500, accordingly the stock prices of A will decrease by 1%. That's how the exact correlation is. While in the previous example, there is 0.5 correlation. That means when there is a 1 year increase in the age, 0.5% of increase in the glucose level. So that's how the correlation is identified using the correl function in MS Excel. Next, we are going to see the charts in Excel. What are charts? When you want to graphically represent some data, it is very difficult to interpret Excel workbooks that contains a lot of data. Charts allow you to illustrate your workbook data graphically, which makes it easy to visualize comparisons and trends. Excel has several different types of charts, allowing you to choose one that best fits your data. In order to use charts effectively, you will need to understand how different charts are used. So we will start with the column charts. So you'll see all these different types of charts that we are going to learn today. So to start, we'll go back to our example sheet where I have the sheet for column chart. That means there is a data that is already available where I have the data for the region along, or rather the sales data for each region, which is split into 2 years, which is 2016 and 2017. This data is in millions. So you can see that the Mumbai has done a sales of 65 million in 2016, while it has done the sale of 70 million in 2017. Same goes with London. It has done 55 million in 2016, while in 2017 they have done 65 million. USA, you can see 45 million and 52 million. While if you see Nagpur, you will see that the sales have reduced from 2016 to 17. Here, this is smaller data, so you're able to even identify where it is going wrong and how is it related, how is the comparison done. So instead of doing that, if you want to send it to your management, you can just select this data and create a chart that will show exact comparison on your screen and it will represent it graphically. So how do I do that? I go to insert. In 2016, there is a new option that has come up, which is called as a recommended chart. That means whenever you select any data and then click on insert, it will give you an option as recommended chart where the Excel will recommend you the types of chart that will look good with these kind of data, or rather it will properly represent this data which you are looking at. So I select the data that I want the graph for, and then I go to recommended charts. When I go to recommended charts, you will see that there is the first chart that it is recommending is the column chart. This is your column chart. But as we are now seeing the column chart to start with, or each type of chart, we will start with the column chart for now, and then we'll come back to the recommended charts. So you'll see the first one, the column chart is here given in the icon for 2016. First 2D chart that you can see is the column chart. I click on that and the data is coming next to one another. When is the column chart really useful? The column chart is useful in such kind of datas where there is a comparison required. So column charts use vertical bars to represent data. They can work with many different types of data, but they are most frequently used for comparing information, like in our case 2016 and 17. So I have got this data as column chart and it is comparing between the 2016 and 17. Now looking at this chart, it looks very nice. However, you will see there is something missing, as in when I'm looking at the data for Mumbai, if I don't see this table, I will not be able to identify what is the real sale done by Mumbai. I'll have to mouse over it to get the number. When I mouse over it, it says series 2016 point Mumbai value 65. It gives you all the data. However, if I am just outside this data, I will not be able to see the information on in one go. It just shows which one is the smaller value. In Gujarat, I can see that in 2017, they have done less sale as compared to 2016. But I need the exact number. So for exact number, what I can do is, one way of doing that is I can go and look at it by doing a mouse over it. Another way to do that is to just see it. I can add the data label. How do I add a data label? There are different ways to add a data label. One way to do that is first select where you want to add the data label. Say I want to add the data label for 2016 and 17, both the bars. So I cannot do it together. So what I can do is I can select one at a time by using the left click and then right click on that same data and then click on add data label. Once I do that, it will add those numbers on that data. Secondly, I can do it for 2017 also by selecting it. However, there is another way of doing it. If I now want to delete the data labels, I'll just select and click on delete from my keyboard and it will work. Now, if I do not have the data labels here, I want to add it using this plus sign. It's only available in 2016. When I select the chart, there is an option as a plus sign. I click on plus and I click on data labels. It will automatically add data labels for both the bars. I don't have to select each of the bars. This is how your data labels are added. Now, if you can see, there is a axis Y which is given here, which has some numbers. Why those numbers are there? Because earlier we did not have data labels, and that's the reason we could see with these numbers where our data sits. So just above 60, somewhere between 60 and 70. So I assume that it is 65. So that is how it was showing. However, now that I have the data labels, I will not need this information, or I will not need this access on the left hand side. So how do I remove that access from the left hand side that you can see there? There are again, one way of doing that is going to the design mode, which is after you select the chart, go to design mode and then add under add chart element, I will see axis, which is the x-axis that we used to call. Another one is the primary vertical axis. Vertical axis is the vertical which is on the left hand side that we were just talking about. This one. This is your primary vertical and this is primary horizontal. So I want to remove the primary vertical. As of now, both are highlighted. That means both are there. I want to remove the primary vertical, so I select that. It just goes away. That's one way of doing it. easier way or the quickest way to do that is just select the axis. Be very careful that only the axis is selected. You will see that 4 small ball kind of a thing that comes on the 4 corners of that axis. Once I do that, and once I select that, I can press delete del from my keyboard and it will go away. Third thing that I can see on this chart is the chart title. I have to add a title to this chart. So how do I add a title? It is already there on the list. I just have to add the title. I select the data there and add the title as sales comparison or sales for 2 years. And in the bracket, I'll put in millions so that they don't get confused that why is it showing as only 50, 40 or whatever. So this is how I can show my data. One more thing that I would recommend doing is removing these grid lines. The grid lines will be more useful when you don't have the data labels, because then it gives you where exactly your data sits. With the y-axis, you'll be able to see the number. But when I don't need this grid lines at all. So I'll just select the grid lines and then click on delete on my keyboard. That's one way. Another way to do that is just go to that plus sign and press the grid line. Grid lines are there by default. Now if you see the data, it looks even more cleaner or it looks even more presentable because there is no grid lines at the back. It's all clean. This is how you can tweak your data as per your requirement. This is how your column chart works, but you can do the same thing with the other charts as well. There are other quick things that you can do with the chart is by also changing the chart type if you want to, or changing the data that you have selected. So you have selected this data in order to get this chart. However, I want to change the data. So I can click on that design. In the under design, you will see under data, select data. Once I click on that select data, it will give me an option here to change the data range for the chart. So I can click on this data range to change the chart. Very important part that you will see here is switch row or column. So what happens is, as of now, my y-axis only contain the numbers and the x-axis contain the Mumbai, London and everything, and the data which is the colors or the bars which are there that are in the colors. That is 2016 and 17, which is the year is showing in 2 different bars. Now, when I click on this switch row and column, what will happen is all the region which is there will become your color of the bar or different bars, while your 2016 and 17 will come on the x-axis. Let's see how that happens by just clicking on switch rows and columns. Once I do that and click on OK, you will see that 2016 data is showing under the x-axis and all the bars are showing now with the regions. This also can be done. However, in this case, it is a little difficult to identify the or do the comparison between the 2 years. You can do comparison between in 2016, what is the sales that you have done for each region. That kind of a comparison can be done to identify. If you see, Gujarat has done the lowest sale in 2016. While again in 2017, Hyderabad has done the lowest sale. So this kind of comparison can also be done, but depending on what kind of a comparison you're looking at, you can always click on switch row and column. You can also use this button to switch row and column. Otherwise, you can click on select data and then use this information. This is how your charts will work in Excel and how you can add new data into or data labels, how you can format your data using the different data sets under design. Moving on to the next chart, our next chart in the list is the line chart. Line charts are ideal for showing trends. Like you have in our list, I have the number of days and the temperature that is changing as per the number of days. On day 1, so we are trying to say maybe in December. So in USA, we have this days. If you are trying to see that on day 1 of December, if I start with day 1, what was the temperature and how is it going up or is it going down? So that kind of information, if I'm trying to identify, I can use the line chart because the line chart will give me a kind of a trend on different days. So how do I create a line chart? When we have the data where we have to show the trend in a particular time frame, that time we are going to show it as in the line chart. Like for example, in our sheet, we have the days from day 1 to day 6, identifying what is the temperature like in these days. So we have a trend, like in this first day it is 43, the next day is 53, third day it is 50, then fourth day again goes up by 57, fifth day going up 59, and then sixth day again it is 67. We're just showing a trend of the data. In that case, I'm going to use the line chart. So I'll use the line chart by selecting the data. It is giving me the line and it's showing you how it is going up. So it starts with the day one, it is lower, then it goes higher, and then it keeps on going higher, higher, higher. Only in the day three, it dips a little down, but it keeps on going after that. This is how your line chart works. So whenever you have this kind of a data where you have to show a trend, we are going to use the line chart. What is the next one? The next one is a pie chart. Pie chart make it easy to compare proportion. Each value is shown as a slice of a pie. So it's easy to see which value makes up for the percentage of the whole. So for example, I have this book type. Which are the book types that is being sold by the bookstore, which is the classic, mystery, romance, science fiction, and spiritual. The revenue that is generated out of these books are also listed here. For classic, it is $18,500. By mystery, it is $78,970, and so on and so forth. I'm trying to identify what is the total revenue that I have generated, which book type is giving me the maximum revenue, while which book type is giving me the lowest revenue. To do that, I can use a pie chart because it's going to give me the part of a pie. Like here, you will see that the orange part is actually the mystery part. Mystery is being sold maximum time part of the time, and the revenue is also generated. Now, similarly, like we did it for the column chart, you can also use the data tables in the pie chart as well. How do we use the data tables in pie chart? By again using that plus sign on the right hand side, or just right clicking and selecting the add data label. As of now, we'll use the plus sign and click on the data labels. Once I do that, the data labels will be added on the list. Now in this case, the numbers are being added. However, I also want to add the chart title. The chart title is also already mentioned as the revenues. So we can leave it as it is. If you need to change that, you can always double click inside and start changing the name of the chart as well, or the chart title. In the data labels that we have added, you will see that only the numbers have been added. I have to check which color belongs to which in order to see where does the highest number land. So if there are bigger lists, there are only 5 different lists, so that is fine. So if there are about 10 to 12 lists and you want to see which one belongs to which, it is a little difficult to identify that. So what I can do is I can add the chart labels on each of them, like a data labels. I can also add the labels on each one of them to identify how does that look. So how can I do that? By going to the data labels in the add chart elements and then click on more data labels option. As soon as I do that, a new window or a new level has opened up on the right hand side. I can select the category name. What will happen is as soon as I select the category name, it automatically gives me the category name in the list. Now the category name you can see is separated by a comma and it is coming next to each other. If you want to change the separator, you can use any of these as a separator. I can use new line. So what will happen is the number will go in the new line. So it looks a little better. Again, like the earlier one where we removed the x-axis, in this case, now we have added the names on the chart itself. So I can remove these legends from the bottom. So it looks a little cleaner. Now I can even make this a little bigger because we have enough space to make it bigger as I have removed the legends from the bottom. So this is how your pie chart will look. Moving on to the next one. The next one is a bar chart. Bar chart works just like the column chart, but they use the horizontal bars instead of the vertical bars. Where is it useful? But it is useful in the data where you have the bigger names of the headings, like in this case. Yes, the inbound marketing demonstrator ROI. If I insert the normal column chart like this, now your the data is smaller, so it is just giving you in that same line. However, if you have a bigger data, or even it will look better if you have the bar charts, which is shown in the horizontal level like this, because you can clearly read the headings here on the left hand side and your bar charts goes on the right. Again, removing the grid lines, adding the data labels will remain the same. Moving on to the next one, that is a surface chart. What is a surface chart and how is it useful? Surface charts are useful when you want to find the optimum combination between two sets of data. Like in our list, we have the marketing, finance, and effort, and they are which field is used or which department is used to get these details, like recruitment, how much you have to recruit in these 3 departments, which is the financial, marketing, and the effort. How much contribution is of the environment in the financial, marketing, and the effort, how much assets are there in the financial marketing and the effort, and the building, how much is there, and the expenses that has been formed a part of these three departments. So if I want to know these, so I'm trying to combine the recruitment part, I'm trying to identify the combination of marketing, finance, and effort, how much recruitment has been done in the combination of all three. In this kind of a situation, I'll be using the surface chart. So how do I use the surface chart? Where is it located? Again, if I go to recommended chart also, I'll be able to see the surface chart under recommended chart. Under recommended charts, there is a window or tab called all charts. I can select that, go to surface. Here I'll get that option of 3D surface. I click on OK, you will be able to see the surface chart here. So it gives you the effort, marketing, and finance. So you will see that the combination of the recruitment here, which is this part, is showing your total recruitment done for all the three departments. Same goes with environment, how much environment is affected due to finance, marketing, and effort, asset that has been used by these three departments, and so on and so forth. So how we are adding the values to this. So this is how it shows. You can again remove the grid lines if you want from this list so that it looks a little better. And it also gives a number as 0 to 200 as blue, which is this part, because the 200 only is affected. When I say 0 to 200, this is the effort is 159. That's the reason it is showing as 0 to 200. The second one is marketing, 200 to 400, which is 345 in case of finance. So that's a little bigger. It is showing here the orange one. The next one is actually your gray, which is 400 to 600, which has got a little even bigger. So this is how your data is identified by using the surface chart. Moving on to the next one. So we have learned how the charts work in Excel and how you can make a little bit changes in order to identify the best chart that fits into it. You can also use the change chart type option to change a particular chart. So if you think that the surface chart is not fitting into this, you can select the chart and click on change chart and then use one of these recommended charts from the list. This is how we learned the charts today. Let's move on to the next one, which is the pivot tables. What is the pivot table and how is it useful in your day-to-day life? Many people have the idea that building a pivot table is complicated and time consuming, but it's simply not true. Compared to the time it would take you to build an equivalent report manually, pivot tables are incredibly fast. If you have well-organized source data, you can create a pivot table in less than a minute. So let's see how you can do that. First of all, I have a sheet with all the data information there. Like in our sheet, I have the list of employee code, their names, so department, region, branch, and their salary information. I am going to create a pivot table in order to show the different departments' salary, how much salary are we paying to different departments. However, before I do that, I'll have to show you how to create a pivot table. To create a pivot table, I first will go to the database for which I need to create the pivot table. So I go to the database, I click on insert. After I click on insert, there is an option called pivot table. I click on pivot table. A new window will pop up. In the pivot table wizard, I have to select the table or the range for which the pivot table is to be created. So I select range A1 to H101. The next one that I have to select is either the new sheet or the existing sheet. New sheet, that means when I click new sheet and click on OK, it will automatically create a new sheet in the existing workbook and the pivot table will be placed in that new sheet. However, if I click on existing worksheet, I have to give a new location. That means the sheets that I already have on the workbook, from that sheet, which cell do I need the pivot to be placed? Hence, I will click on the location and select the location that I need the pivot table on. I can select from any of the existing sheet that I have on the workbook. However, this time I'm going to use a new worksheet and click on OK. This will create a new Excel sheet for me just before the Excel sheet that I was working on currently. So it is now creating that Excel sheet. Once the Excel sheet is created, on that sheet you will see the pivot table wizard is already available, or a blank space where it will show you the pivot table number. And on the right hand side, you can already see the pivot table fields that are shown. Under the pivot table fields, all the headings which were there in the database have already occurred here, like employee code, first name, last name, department, region, branch, hire date, and the basic salary. So everything is already showing here. Now, before we start with the pivot table, we need to understand these 4 fields that are there on the pivot table. So every field has its importance. So let's start with the values area, which is this one. The values area is the large rectangular area below to the right of the column and the row heading. The values area calculates and counts data. That means anything that you enter here, it will give you the calculation of that value. For example, if I pick salary, which I drag and put it on the values column, it will automatically give me the sum of the salary. You can see it says sum of basic salary. That means the total salary that has been paid. You can change this to any other field. For example, if I click on this and click on value field setting, I can then give other calculations, right? Count, average, max, min, standard deviation, anything that I need in this field, I can select and give that option. If I don't want the sum of the salary, I just need to know the count. Can click on count and it will give me the count of that cells which has the salaries. So I click on sum for now. The data field that you drag and drop here are typically those that you want to measure. Fields such as sum of revenue, count of units, or average of price. Row area, which is this part. Placing a data field in the row area displays the unique value from that field down the rows on the left side of the pivot table. That means because I said that I want to do it at the department, when I drag it to the rows, it will pick up all the unique values. So even if admin is coming 10 times in our database, like admin comes a lot of times here, it will only show once in the pivot table. Same goes with CCD, same goes with the director. What does that mean? It will group all the admin together. Then it will sum the salary of admin, the next cell where I have done the values, and it will give me the answer here. So it will giving me the salary for only for admin, then for CCD, then for director, finance, marketing, personnel, R&D, and sales. This is how your database will look if you put the data into the rows area. Next is the column area. The column area is composed of headings that stretch across the top of the column, which is this. So if you want to give a heading other than this, if you want things like region to be shown in the column. If I put column, what will happen is now it will show me the east, west, north, south. It will be split as per the east, west, north, south in the column, and it is kind of heading that is given on the top. Like for east and admin, this is the total salary. This is how it is giving you the split. Next one is the filter column or the filter area. Filter area is an optional set of one or more drop-down list at the top of the pivot table. Here the filter area contains the region field. The pivot table is set to show all the region like this. If I put it on the top here, it is actually an optional area, but it will only show me the region on the top. Then it will not show in the column. The filter area allows you to easily apply filters to the pivot table. For example, if I leave my region here and try to put a branch in the filters column, I can select which branch I need the data for. For example, if I need only for Ambala, I can click on Ambala and click OK. It will only give me data for Ambala. Same way, if I select the rest of the other data, it will give me the list for other. If I want more than one data, I'll just click on select multiple items and I can select 2, 3 at a time and then it will be filtered as per the branch and give me the rest of the data. This is how your pivot table actually works. Like I said, you can use these value field settings to get the other calculations to be done with this value field setting. This is how your data or the pivot table works. Now, this was a simple part of the pivot table. If you ever want to sort on the pivot table, let me first remove the region to make it look easier. So to understanding will be more easier. I'm removing the branch from the filters as well. I'm just leaving the department and the sum of the basic salary. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm going to filter as per the salary. So I want to understand which department I'm giving the maximum salary. I select the salary column or I just click or keep my cursor in the salary column. I go to data and the same way as we do the sort, I'll just click on sort there. Once I do that, it will give me a wizard where I have to select whether you have to sort as per smallest to largest or largest to smallest. I will do is largest to smallest. And I can see that in the sales department, I'm giving the maximum salary, which is 3,45,075. So this is how your sort works in the pivot table. So there are other things that you can also use in the pivot table, which are really, really important that we are going to see here. There is something called as a slicer in pivot table. What is slicer in pivot table and how does that work? When you go to analyze data, there is an option called as insert slicer. If you are anywhere outside the pivot, you're not keeping your cursor in the pivot, you will not be able to see the analyze button. To go to the analyze button, you have to click on the pivot table and then click on analyze. Once you click on analyze, there will be an option called as insert slicer. Now, insert slicer in the sense it's a kind of filtering of data. So the same way, similarly, like I did it for putting the branch on the top or the region on the top where I could filter the data, I can use the slicer to filter this data. So if I click on slicer and select which field I want to filter it with, like if I want to filter it with the hire date, I can select on hire date and click OK. Now it will give me a slicer or the list of hire dates which I can select from. So if I select only this hire date, it will automatically give me data for only the employees who have been hired on this particular date. So this is how your slicer works. However, now you can see that in the slicer, okay, I can only select one data or one date at a time. But if I want to select more dates, then there is this something called as multi-select, which is on the top right-hand corner. This is only available in 2016 version. So when I click on multi-select, it will give me options to select multiple dates at a time in the slicer. So it is not necessary that you have to only do the dates. You can also add some more information other than just the dates. Click on analyze, I go to slicer again, and now I can select anything else that I want. Now department is already there. I can select maybe branch this time. So it will give me another slicer. So you can see the another slicer which is there here. So there are two slicers now. So not necessary that you have to only work with one slicer. You can work with two slicers or multiple slicers. I select Calcutta and Darjeeling and it gives me data for the Calcutta and Darjeeling for these two dates only. If I select one more date, it will give me data for Calcutta, Darjeeling for these 3 dates. So the slicers can be multiple slicers on the list and it will give you information as per your requirement. How to create a chart from the pivot table. And it also looks the same as a normal chart. So when I click on the database where I want to create the pivot table from, and I then click on the pivot chart by going to analyze button and then pivot chart, it will automatically create the chart that I want to. Similarly, as we get the column chart in this case, so I click OK. Once I do that, it will automatically create a chart. In the chart, you can, similar to the normal chart, you can give the name as a chart title that we are looking at. Add the data labels by clicking on this plus sign and click on add data or just add data labels. Once you do that, the data labels will be added. All these fields which you can see, sum of basic salary, department, if you don't want to show it on the table because it is a pivot tables chart, it is giving you these information also. If you want to just hide that, you can right click and click on hide all field buttons from chart. It will automatically hide those fields. Now if I add any additional information, like in this one, you can only see that the sum of the basic salary is given. There is nothing on the row columns. So what I can do is I can also add data in the row. Once I do that, it will automatically update the pivot chart as well and give me the information as per the row column also. Now, again, like where we had used or changed the chart type by selecting the data and switching the row to column, you can use a similar function here to switch from row to column. So here the data will show in a different way altogether. So as you update your pivot table, your pivot chart also keeps updating. And all the same functionalities that is available in the normal chart is also available in your pivot chart. The only difference is that it is linked to your pivot chart, the other data is linked to your database. That is the only difference. But pivot chart, when you are looking at that, it is very, very useful because your pivot chart is on updating as per the new data that is updated there. Also, you are only giving the information or you're only requesting the information that you want in the chart rather than everything coming into the chart and then you selecting which parts you want to display. So that's how your pivot table and the pivot charts work. If they are really, really useful in your day-to-day reporting that you do for your companies, and it will really help you to do that. Now we have also learned how to do the pivot table and how to use the slicers in the pivot table. There is another important part of the slicer is that you can link two pivot tables to the slicer. For example, here I have one pivot table which is splitting the department and giving you the total salaries as per each department. Now I'm creating a new pivot table from the same database. Say I just copy and paste, that will also give me another pivot table. But I do not want department. This time I want to know the salaries given to the employees in different regions. So this is split as per the region. The slicer that I can add here is by clicking any pivot table I can select and then click on slice on analyze and then click on insert slicer. The slicer will be as per the region or the date or the last name, whichever you want to. As of now, I'm selecting the branch and click on OK. Once I click on branch, it will give me the options of the branch with which I can select and analyze the data. But what I need now is I want to link this pivot table, which is a pivot table 2 to pivot table 1. That means when I select Ambala, you will see that only second pivot table has given me the data for Ambala, which is the north region. The first pivot table stays as it is because this slicer is only linked to pivot table 2. I want to link this slicer to both the pivot tables. How can I do that? I will have to click on the slicer, right click on that, then click on report connections. Once I click on report connection, it will give me the list of pivot tables available in your workbook. Now we know that in the sheet 1 we have both the pivot tables. Sheet 10 is not our sheet. So both the pivot tables are in sheet 1. So I'll select both the pivot tables from sheet 1 and click on OK. Once I do that, now I will be able to link both the data. And now when I select Bangalore or one branch, it will automatically give me data for that one branch. Just like that, Cochin, it will be giving me data for that one branch. Same goes with Ambala or Aligarh, and if I select more than one, it will give me all the ones selected and give me data for that 2 or 3 branches that I had selected. So basically what I'm trying to say is you can connect 2 or 3 pivot tables to one slicer so that you will be able to get the filters with one slicer for both the pivot tables. So this is how your pivot table is, or the slicers are useful in case of trying to get the filters for your data. The next topic that we are going to see today is the data analysis using Excel. So how do you do a data analysis using Excel? So there's something called as the analysis toolpack in Excel through which you can do the data analysis. The analysis toolpack is an Excel add-in program that provides data analysis tools for financial, statistical, and engineering data analysis. To load the data analysis toolpack, you have to execute some steps in Excel. So how do you do that? Let's go to our Excel. On the File tab, I click on the Options. Once I click on the Options, under the Add-ins, select the Analysis Toolpack and click on OK. So when I go to Add-ins, under the Analysis Toolpack that you see here, under the name where you see Add-ins, select the Analysis Toolpack and click on Go button or click on OK button. Once I click on OK button, what happens? It will open the new data for you or the new window for you. Click on Analysis Toolpack and click on Go. Once I click on Go, it will give you that option of Analysis Toolpack, Analysis Toolpack VBA, Euro Currency Tools, and the Solver add-in. I will add the Analysis Toolpack and click on OK. Once I do that, now I will be able to see that under Data, there is something called as Data Analysis added to my ribbon. So you can now click on the data analysis to create your different analysis that you want to do from the list that you have. Now let's see how we can create data analysis using the Excel data that we have. So what do we have here? On our Excel sheet, I have a list of data like I have the quantity sold, the price of the product, and the advertising. Now this example teaches you how to perform a regression analysis in Excel and how to interpret the summary output. So now in the below data we can see here on the list, the book question is there a relation between the quantity sold and the price in the advertisement? So what is it? Is there a relation between this and the output is? So what are they trying to understand is if this is the price and this is the kind of advertisement that we are doing, or this is the amount that we are spending on the advertisement, is the quantity sold increasing or decreasing, or any relation that we are able to see? So can we predict the quantity sold if we know the price and advertising? So if I know only these two things, can I predict what will be my quantity sold? That is, to do such kind of analysis, we can use this data analysis toolpack. So I go onto the data tab in the analysis group and click on data analysis. Now select the regression from this list and click on OK. Now there is a range that supplies some basic regression statistic. So how do you do this? Now there are two things that we have to give: the input Y range and the input X range. this will always be by default blank, and we have to give the ranges to the Excel. So how do you give the range and how do you decide what should be the range? So the first thing that we'll give to Excel is the Y range. Select the Y range A1 to A8. This is the predictor variable, also called as the dependent variable. So this is something that we have to predict. It is dependent on these two things. We don't know the quantity sold. We are trying to understand what will be the quantity sold if we have the price and the advertising. So your dependent variable will be your Y range, which is your A2 to A8. Second one that you have is the X range. These are the explanatory variables. These are also called as the independent variables. These columns must be adjacent to each other. So whichever you're selecting. So I am selecting C8. These two should be adjacent to each other. Now I have to ensure why I'm taking these two things, because these are my independent variables. That means this two I know and this is dependent, or the quantity sold is dependent on this two. That's the reason the quantity sold is called as a dependent variable, while the price in the advertisement is called as the independent variable. Now we have to check on the labels and click on the output range box and select the where do we need the output. So where do I need the output to be shown? So I click on the output range box and then I click on wherever I need the output. Say I need the output in A11. So I select that, then check on residuals. Now the residuals will not be checked. You will have to check the residuals and click on OK. Once I click on OK, the answer will be displayed in the summary output box here. What does that say? So if you see the results here, you can see that there is a range that supplies some basic regression statistics, including the R square. So what is it doing? It's giving you the basic regression statistics. Regression statistics means we were trying to find the regression, and that's the reason that is what it is giving you. The standard error, the number of observations. Below that information, the regression tool supplies analysis of variance, which is ANOVA, including information about the degrees of freedom. This is called the degrees of freedom, sum of squares, mean square value, the F value, and the significance of F. Now, beneath the ANOVA information, the regression tool supplies the information about the regression line calculated from the data. Now, what is that calculated from the data? So it says that including the coefficient, standard error, that's the same thing that we're looking at, the standard error here. Then you have the t-stat and the probability value for the intercept, as well as the same information for the independent value. So this was for the dependent, this is for the independent value that you can see. Then, which is the number of ads. Excel also plots out some of the regression data using the simple scatter chart. So you can also add the scatter chart that you want to according to your detail that you need from this. So this is how your regression analysis works. So this is more of the statistical analysis or the financial analysis that you are planning to do when you are to the financial department using Excel. This is how your Excel helps you to do your work when it comes to working on the data analysis.
So back in the day, there was something called as waterfall development or the waterfall model of development. So when I say waterfall, you can think about something like, a banking application or an insurance application or some police department application. So the moment I say waterfall model, you can think of like a really huge application, which is, made up of small chunks of code. For example, this application might have a front end, this application would obviously have a back end, and then it has some DNS routes and a few services that it's dependent on. So it doesn't really matter how many services are part of this application, but this entire application was shipped as a one whole application. That's how things used to happen back in the day. And this was referred to, or this method of development, the waterfall method, the application was referred to as a monolithic application. Now it's called monolithic, if I can write it properly, monolithic application. Now, everything was fine and dandy unless like 2000s and 2002. That's when things started to become a bit extreme because the clients would have 10 different requirements that would change almost every day. Now, if you have one single application, you have a single point of failure. So if you were changing even this little part of this application, and if this part was to fail, this entire application would stop working. That's when people started brainstorming about better approaches to software development. And how can you meet the requirements of the millennium, of the today's world, without actually affecting how the software is written or any application is written in the first place? That's where the ideas of agile development came into the picture. So that was one part of the problem. The second part of the problem was because it was a monolithic application, the time that it required to actually push the changes. For example, let's say you have an application up and running in your production environment, and your development team actually created a new feature, or they modified the existing feature. Now that feature is supposed to go in production, right? But it actually used to take days and months back in the day because you would never really know what's going to happen if you put it to production today. There are so many moving parts that you're never sure if it's going to break the existing application that you have. So people used to actually schedule the maintenance. I'm pretty sure you would have received those emails, right? Like, we will be unavailable during this weekend because there is a scheduled downtime. Now that's what used to happen. Now that cannot really fly anymore, right? Think about companies like Netflix, Uber, Amazon. They can't really be down even for a moment because you never really know how many people are accessing the service. Now, that is the second part of the problem that people were trying to solve. That's when Agile came into the picture. Now, Agile, put in simple terms, is a philosophy to rapidly deploy an application in much more organized way. Now, obviously, there's a lot more details than meets the eye, but in a simple sentence, that's what you mean by agile. You want rapid deployment of the software or the code that you're writing without having to wait for a longer time. At the same time, you want to make sure that you have small chunks of code that can be shipped to the client or whichever application you're working with. That's the reason Agile exists today. And now we're going to look at what do you mean by Agile and how can you actually implement this. So I hope we are pretty clear about why was there a requirement of Agile to begin with. This is what you mean by waterfall model. Now, this is the traditional software building practice, right? So you would gather the requirements, you would design or architect how you imagine your software to be, and then there would be actually coding that would be executed, there would be verification, and there would be maintenance post deployment. So this is what has been happening for the past 4 decades, but this won't really fly in today's world because there are multiple changes being pushed every single day. So you can't really just go through the months of planning for a little change. So the way applications are developed have changed, and so is the way applications are deployed. So that's what you mean by waterfall model. Now, I think I have explained it pretty well. There are a lot of companies that still follow this model, but at the end of the day, all of them are trying to, migrate to a more agile development. It's not so easy depending on the size of the company, but you will still see a few companies using waterfall, and they are in process of moving away from this model. Then comes Agile to rescue. So what is Agile? We've talked about the requirement or why does Agile even exist so far. Now let's look at what do you mean by Agile. So Agile is nothing but a chain of rapid development and deployment, meaning the first section of your software development is always the planning part. But now you obviously know what you're about to build, but you kind of break that entire application down into small chunks of code, and then you work on those small services one service at a time, ensuring that, first of all, you kind of follow the microservices model, and at the same time, you don't really affect the entire application in general. So you plan, you design, you architect, and you actually develop the application, you test, you deploy it, and you review it. If you notice, launch is actually outside of this entire circle, meaning every time you make a change, it could be something as simple as just one line of code change, just a variable being renamed. So it doesn't matter how small or how big the change is. The idea is the moment the change is made, it has to be deployed even in a dev environment so that you can get a constant feedback over what's happening with the code that you have. Imagine if you actually had to wait for 1 month or 2 weeks just to get the feedback on if you really want that change or not. Now, that could be a little annoying or frustrating from the developer's point of view. So that's the first aspect of Agile. You plan, you design, you develop, you test, you deploy the changes, and then you review the changes before you actually launch them into production. The other major aspect of Agile is now, instead of working with like a huge chunk of application, you work in iterations. So when I say iterations, what I mean is you have a specific set of tasks that have to be completed in specific priority so that you already know what you're supposed to be working on and you are not really worried about 10 different microservices at the same time. You have a specific requirement where you should be focused. So you have the first iteration, which might be the first part of your application, second iteration, third iteration. So think about it this way. If you have Amazon.in, if you're working for, Amazon.com or Amazon.in, which is a shopping website, you might visit Amazon.com and you might think, yeah, it's a one website. It's not really one website. It's a website that's broken down into several other services. For example, the website itself might be called a front end. Now, the moment you reach to Amazon.com, you can click on a product, right? And then you can view the details of the product. So that service, it's not really a part of the front end anymore. That is being called from something else called as catalog. Now, once you decide that this is the product that I want to buy, you click on buy now, and then it's going to take you to something called a shopping cart. And after you made the payments and all of those things, you have email notifications and you have text notifications. The point here is, even though all of these things are working in synergy, they are actually completely separate services, completely separate tasks in the underlying architecture. So if I am working on something on the front end, I don't really have to be worried about the catalogs and the shopping because first, I'm getting a constant feedback even before the launch. I'm getting a feedback about what's going to happen once we launch your code to the production. At the same time, I don't really have to be afraid that it's going to break my entire application because all of them are developed as separate microservices. Your one service will never affect another service. Of course, the dependent services might be affected, but the idea is you never really want a single point of failure. That's the idea of Agile. Now, let's move forward. Now, what are the terms and the values of Agile? So the first value is people over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over rigid contracts, and responding to change rather than following a plan. So people over process and tools, this kind of gives you, a development-centric and client-centric environment, meaning just because you've been doing something in a traditional way for the past 8 years, it does not mean you don't really explore the options that you have right now. For example, whatever you did with PHP MySQL yesterday can also be done with Python and Flask today, right? I'm not saying change your entire application. What I'm saying is the model is pretty much people-centric. The people, like the development team and the customers and the end users, are given more importance, and working software over comprehensive documentation. Now, this is something that all of us would have noticed at some point in time, right? So every application would have an internal document of how long? 100 pages, 150 pages about all the classes, all the methods, how the application is being built, and why the application is being built, who's the owner, and like plethora of other details that you as an individual is not even concerned about. You are concerned about what you have to build and how far along are you in that development task. So in Agile, the functional application is given much more importance than the documentation. Because if you think about it, the code itself is a documentation, right? If you knew how to interpret the code, you could look at the code and that can also act as a documentation. So I'm not saying there won't be any documentation. All I'm saying is the development is given more importance over the documentation part. And then customer collaboration over rigid contracts and responding to change rather than following the plan. So Agile is really feedback dependent, meaning back in the day, the managers and the product owners will have multiple meetings. They'll come up with the kind of software that they want. Everything would be discussed over like 3-4 months, and then people would want to stick to the plan. Because you already spent 4 months planning this thing, now if you wanted to change even a little part of this, the entire meetings and planning would have to be done all over again. Now, Agile changes that. Agile works more on the feedback. Just because the plan has been made does not mean there cannot be any changes. Because you've broken things down into smaller chunk of tasks, any one of the tasks can be modified according to the requirements at any point in time. So these are the values that Agile bring to the table, right? So there are two parts of the puzzle. You have a benefit and then you have a value. So benefit is what you get, like right off the bat, and value is what you derive out of it. So what we saw before were the values where everyone, on the table receives some or the other kind of benefit because of Agile. Principles of Agile: satisfied customer, welcome changing requirements, deliver working software frequently, frequent iterations with stakeholders, motivated individuals, face-to-face communications, measure by working software, maintain constant pace, sustain technical excellence and good design, keep it simple, empower self-organizing team, reflect and adjust continuously. Now, this might look more like a textbook thing, like here are the 10 benefits, just go with Agile. But that's not really the case. We are actually going to look at how all of this materializes, like, over the future slides when we actually talk about how can you implement Agile in the working or the team that you're working with. So let's move on. Now, advantages of Agile. We pretty much kind of, touched upon all of these things for now. Persistent software delivery, increased stakeholder satisfaction, inspect and adapt, welcome to changes at any stage, design is important, and daily interactions. Now comes the meat of the entire presentation. Now you have a basic idea of Agile, right? But question that everybody has at any point in time is, what's in it for me? Okay, you told me what's Agile and how can it help? But how can it help me as an individual, or how can I actually implement Agile? So there are multiple frameworks or philosophies when it comes to Agile. So Scrum, Extreme Programming, Lean, Kanban, Crystal are some of the examples. The most popular one out there, it's called Scrum. Now, again, these philosophies are not really set in stone. It's not like if you're following Scrum that, it's 100% what Scrum dictates you how to do it that way. That's not really the case. In majority of the cases, what people do is they primarily implement Scrum, and then they have some ideas from Kanban, Extreme, and Lean, and then they kind of have their own philosophy that works for their organization. But Scrum is the one that's used by the majority of the people. So even before looking at the slide, before we go through what we see in the slide, I can just kind of explain Scrum to you the way I know it, right? Because I've worked with multiple development teams, I've seen most of these being implemented, and I know how each one of them work in a real world example. So what is Scrum? So Scrum is basically an iterative philosophy, meaning you iterate over the changes, you iterate over the deployments in software development one at a time. So if you wanted to talk about Scrum, Scrum is an iteration of plan, then build, then test, and then review. Now, you would constantly be iterating over all of these aspects. Now, what do I even mean by this? So let's first look at how or what does a Scrum implemented team looks like. So in Scrum implemented team, you have the very first person that I want to talk about, someone called as product owner. Now, when I say product owner, if you're coming from, more of a traditional software development environment, you can think of a product owner as a manager. He is the guy who holds the responsibility to make sure that the application is deployed as and when committed. At the same time, the application is built exactly as the way it has to be built. So product owner is the guy with the ideas. He might not necessarily be a technical person. He might as well be a guy from the management. He does not necessarily have to know the development or the technicalities in detail. He's the guy with the idea and the owner of the application that would be developed. So pretty much all the accountability lies on him. And then there is someone called a Scrum Master. Now, Scrum Master is someone that you would have traditionally referred to as a team leader or a project owner. Now, you can think about Scrum Master as a team leader. In the hierarchical sense, this is the person that's right below the product owner, and this is the person who actually does the day-to or handles the day-to-day operations, like running the meetings or planning the tasks that have to be done. And then you have the team itself, which will consist of your developers and testers, and depending on your requirement, it might have a few more roles. But then you have the actual team who will execute the tasks. So these are the three roles that you have. But now that we know the people that are involved, how exactly this works, I mean, this looks pretty much similar to what you do at your office. It's just fancy names, right? You have a manager, you have a team leader, and you have a team. So how is it any different from what you do at your office? So that's what we want to look at now. I hope the roles are kind of clear to you. Now that you have the roles defined, let's look at the first thing about the development. So the first part of the development that we want to look at, it's called product backlogs. Now here's where things start to get a bit different from how you might have been working at a traditional environment. Now, in a traditional environment, you have an application that has been already planned for months, and you, along with others, have been working on deploying the application. And the project usually goes on for a few months or even a year or two, depending on the size of the project. Now, in product backlogs, you actually have the same application iterated over in smaller tasks. So when I say smaller tasks, you can think about the same Amazon.in example that we talked about. So the first iteration will have plan, it will have build, it will have test, and it will have review. Now, in this case, I'm not really building the whole application. I obviously have an idea as to what the application is supposed to look like. But for now, let's say I'm only concerned about the front end or what the main or the primary website would look like. Then I have a second iteration where I would, the same cycle, plan, build, test, and review. But this is where I'm actually working with email notification. I'm actually coding how would my email notifications be sent out, and how do you manage the email queues and the rest of the things. And then you have a third iteration, which might just be your payment processing. So in this case, again, the same cycle, you plan, you build, you test, and you review. But the benefit here is that once you have the product backlog, these are all your product backlogs. These are the things that are supposed to be done over a period of time. So the first thing you do is you define the product backlogs, not you as a developer, but the product owner and the Scrum Master. These are the people that would actually come up with all the backlogs instead of just one single application that says, I want this thing to work. They actually break it down into small chunks of code. So that is the job of the product owner and the Scrum Master. Because as I said, product owner might not be a technical guy necessarily. So Scrum Master is the one that would always be a technical guy, right? So both of them would come up with the product backlogs. Once you have a product backlog, there's something called as user stories. So each one of these would now be referred to as user stories, and your Scrum Master actually ends up prioritizing them. Meaning, if you have front-end, email, payment processor, and 10 other backlogs that have to be developed, let's say over next 5 or 7 months, in that case, the Scrum Master and the product owner would kind of prioritize. Now, obviously, payment processor is of no use if you don't even have a front end. So logically, I would want to prioritize my front end over my payment processor. So Scrum Master and product owner will prioritize the user stories that you have. And depending on the priorities that has been set, they come up with something called a sprint backlog. Now, sprint backlog is when your development team actually gets involved in this, because now you already have an organized and prioritized user stories that you are supposed to be working on. So 10 different things are not just dumped on you at the same time. You are given a logical and reasonable tasks that have to be executed one at a time. And once you have the sprint backlog, you can actually start working on it as a developer. Now I'll get rid of this beautiful drawing that I've made for now, and let's just look at sprint backlog. I'm sorry, I can't really, write with my mouse, but I hope you realize it's called sprint. Now there are different, you could call them ceremonies or rituals, but there is something called a sprint planning. Now, the sprint planning, again, it's just a fancy name for the meetings and discussions that you have. During the sprint planning, the product owner will actually explain how he imagines the end goal or the product or the application to look like. So you have something called a sprint planning. you have something called as daily Scrum. Now, daily Scrum is nothing more than, the 15 minutes meeting that happens every day where the developers and the testers and any other role that you have in the team can actually discuss what happened and where you stand, if you need any help, there are any blockades, and what do you plan to do today or tomorrow. And then there is something called a sprint review. So sprint review actually occurs at the end of the user story or the backlog that you've been working on. So each and every one of these user stories, right? They usually are designed with the timeline of 2 weeks in mind. Now, some companies, the sprints may vary, like it could be 2 weeks to 4 weeks, but in majority of the cases, each sprint will last 2 weeks so that you know exactly what you're supposed to do for the next 2 weeks. Now, at the end of the 2 weeks, along with your planning, your daily meetings, once your sprint is completed, you have a sprint review where you actually demo the code that you have, or just some kind of verification to make sure that sprint is actually completed, and then you move on to a new sprint or you move on to a new user story that you have to work on. So that's the idea. That's how things work in general. Now, with that in mind, if we move on to the next slide, this is what the Scrum looks like. So you have a product backlog and then you have a sprint planning. Now, as I mentioned before, each one of these sprints, the timeline is usually a couple of weeks. Depending on the size of your organization, it might last up to a month. But for all the companies that I've worked with, it's always been between 1 to 3 weeks. So you plan for what has to be done during the next 2 weeks, and then you have the user story or the backlog that you're supposed to work on, and then you have your team that actually works on it along with the daily scrums. So you have the daily meetings at the same time, and at the end of the sprint, you have the review, and then you ship the part that you coded. Now, when I say you ship the part, I don't mean you necessarily put it in production, but you know that the part is ready to be assembled into the application that you have. So the idea is at the end of every 2 weeks, you have a shippable part of the application that is ready to be deployed. So instead of working a huge application that would have taken a year anyway, now you kind of break it down into things that can be actually shipped in 2 weeks, depending on the priorities that have been set by the product owner and the Scrum Master that you have. That's the idea of Scrum, to break everything down into smaller chunks of code, smaller chunks of tasks, so that everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do. That's like the methodical part of it, right? You have a method, there's a specific best set of practices that you're following along with the technical side. Because you have a rapid deployment, the moment you write a code, you can actually test it in the dev environment. Now that's where people like me, DevOps, come into the picture. But the idea is you don't really have to wait for a month just to see what you coded right now. If you push the code right now, in matter of minutes, you would actually see that working in the dev environment. So that's the technical side. You have the instant feedback to figure out if you have to move on or, if you have to make some changes to the code that you have right now. Now that's Scrum and Agile in general. Then there is a second method. So Scrum was one of the philosophies or framework. Then you have something called as extreme programming. Now this was one of the first ones. A group of developers came up with it back in 2001. I think the guy was called Kent. So they kind of came up with the idea of agile development. They came up with a set of best practices, and then they even signed a manifest. So they actually came up with a manifest that, these are the things that we should be following in the industry. These are the best practices and these are the principles, and they even signed it. So extreme programming has been around for almost a couple of decades, and Scrum is kind of the next iteration of extreme programming. It's a bit different, but as I said before, majority of the organizations use Scrum programming. So in extreme programming, they came up with, the basic sets of principles like people-centric environment, discipline, and then you have rapid deployment. So project requirements, stories, test cases, task, completion, customer input, iteration planning. Now, both of these things are happening in parallel. So you have project requirements, you have stories, test cases, task, and completion. And at the same time, you have customer input. And at some point, you have customer iterations in the meeting. For example, you developed 20% of the application. and your end user or your client came back with a better idea, or if they need some modifications. So those are the changes. Then you have your UAT testing, you have client-side UAT testing, and acceptance at the end of it. So extreme programming, the ideas are somewhat similar to Scrum, but at the end of the day, all of these philosophies are trying to make the lives of developers, the end users, better and not compromising on technicalities. Rather, making the shippable product better and faster is the idea. All right, let's move on. Then you have lean programming. So lean principles, even this has been around for a while. So eliminate waste, amplify learning, decide as late as possible, decide as fast as possible, empower the team, build integrity, and see the whole. Yeah, so you could call it a framework, you could call it a philosophy or methodology. Now, it really depends on, the word that you want to use. But at the end of the day, it's again trying to become developer centric and people centric and setting best practices to make sure everyone in the team knows exactly what they're supposed to do. And you have a cross functional team. When I say cross functional, essentially, I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, is because you have some or the other development experience. And if you do, then you would have come across this point, right? When you talk to someone, hey, have you seen that feature? Have you looked at the code? And that guy would be like, that code doesn't concern me. It's none of my concern. I'm working on something completely different. Now, we are used to that sort of development, right? Where people individually know what they're supposed to do, and they're not even worried about what the other person is doing. Now it's time we actually break the silos. Just because you're not coding that part does not mean that the code does not concern the part of the code that you are writing. So everybody has to come together and work on the same application, which is what you'll call a cross-functional team. In the Scrum example, once you have the user stories and the backlogs that you're supposed to work on in the next 2 weeks, it doesn't really matter what role do you play in the team. It's your team's responsibility to make sure that the task has been completed. And the task is also being designed with the timeline in mind. So it's not like you're expected to do 6 weeks worth of development in 2 weeks. So the task itself is designed with the timeline in mind. And then you have something like Kanban. So Kanban is similar to Scrum. The difference here is, in case of Scrum, you have smaller chunks of backlogs that you're supposed to work on for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks. In case of Kanban, it's a continuous process. So there is no such thing as sprint in Kanban. What you do in Kanban is you have a list of tasks that are supposed to be done. And for example, you have something like, a whiteboard. You have a build queue, you have a test queue, and you have a ship queue. Now, this is a hypothetical example. You would obviously have plan and the rest of the things. But the point is, you might have 4 things that have to be built, or let's just say 3 services that have to be built. And once the first service has been built, it actually moves on to the testing queue. And then this place is occupied by another service. And once this is done, this is moved on to testing, and this is occupied by another service. Meanwhile, if this testing is done, it will move to the ship queue, and it will eventually be shipped. So the idea is, whatever tasks have been achieved will be replaced by a new item in the queue. So if you have a build queue, test queue, and ship queue, all of these would be moving parts. So if your job is to build this, and let's say your colleague's job is to test this, the moment you push this first item into the testing queue, another item will replace this first item so that you know what is the next thing that you are supposed to be working on. So Kanban is more like a continuous implementation of the software development. So that's what you mean by agility in general. Even if you think about it, the English word agility means to be really rapid, right? Agility would mean whatever you're doing is happening in rapid successions, right? That's what you mean by agility in general. So in case of development, by bringing agility to your team, you're ensuring that everyone's happy at the end of the day, and you still have a technically smarter team that's able to get instant feedbacks. Now, I'll give you a quick example of this. Now, I'm pretty sure all of us, or at least most of us, are aware about Netflix. Now, you would be surprised to know that Netflix is pushing more than 1,000 changes every day into their productions. If you actually worked at a Netflix development team, you would know that these guys are pushing 1,000 changes in production every day. Now, how do you think that's possible? Obviously, they are not pushing it to production without reviewing it or without testing it. Even with all of those things in place, how are they able to deploy more than 1,000 changes every day? Now, these could be very little changes, like, some UI fixes, some database fixes, some payment processor fixes. So we are not really concerned about what the changes are, but I know for a fact that that's the number. That's the amount of changes that they actually push every day. That's possible because you mean rapid deployment by agility or by becoming agile. So that's the level of agility you can actually obtain the moment you have an organized team that is working on the principles of agile. Now, obviously, there are external factors like, how's your infrastructure, how's your DevOps team, but it is possible at the end of the day. And then there is one more framework that's called Crystal. So these are the ideas of agile. Now, I hope I was clear into how can agile help your team in becoming a better development team. So there are three aspects of it, right? Philosophical, technical, and the way software is built. So philosophical being the best practices, like how do you define your teams? Who's a scrum master? Who's a product owner? What's the team? What is a sprint? What are the tasks that you're supposed to do? Then you have the technical side of it. Like if you build a code, how exactly can you deploy the code like automatically? How can you review the code? How can you test the code automatically? And then there is a software development aspect of it that you're moving away from a monolithic application towards the idea of microservices. So these are the three aspects that move parallelly. And at the end of the day, it gives you a peace of mind, it gives your product manager a peace of mind, and the end user a peace of mind with better ideas of deployment. So that you don't really have to run around on 10 different desks confirming if your changes are actually deployed or not.
So what is Scrum? Now to understand the importance of Scrum, let's look at how Scrum compares to the older alternative, which is the waterfall development. The waterfall model consists of a long time which is involved in planning. Then again, by long time, I mean a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. Then it might take about the same amount of time to build the product, say a couple of months more. Then testing, followed by reviewing, and then finally deploying the product. At this point, you might end up bringing the wrong product according to the market demands to the market. Because when you started out with planning this product, it was almost a year ago, and now the market demand might have changed. Now, I'm sure a lot of you might already have guessed what the problem is with such a model. Firstly, the entire plan should be complete before you start building or testing your product. Now, obviously, if you're doing this in one whole iteration, it means that most of the planning is being done without understanding the project or the difficulties that you might face while building the project, the drawbacks, the loopholes, and most times after you start building the project, it is sent back to the planning phase again, which brings you back to your square one. In which case, your project has to start over, or the developers are just criticized for not understanding the plan properly. This process can be repeated many a times, which consumes a lot of time, followed by the product getting thrown over the fence to test, where, in case you encounter problems, the project is thrown back to the building process or sometimes again back to the planning process. And the same thing can happen over the next few steps, including a lot of backstepping and doing over. This can lead to lag times and many months or several years in order to get a product out the door. Scrum solves this problem by breaking the project into smaller parts. First, you start out with just enough planning to get the project started. Next, you build the project with the minimum amount of features, which is like your base features. And then you test for the same and review for the same. And once this cycle is complete, you have in your hands a potentially shippable product. Now this process takes around 2 to 4 weeks and it is repeated time and time again, reducing the time taken for the cycle of planning to testing to reviewing a certain product. This way you end up with several different versions or several different incremental releases, each taking lesser time than the previous or just about the same time. And by the time you have 5 iterations of these, you already have 5 vividly improved versions of the same product, each keeping up with the market development that's going on outside of your company. And this is called Scrum. So Scrum is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. Now you need to understand 3 things about Scrum. Firstly, Scrum is lightweight. Second, it is simple to understand. And third, it is very difficult to master. Scrum itself is a simple framework for effective team collaboration based on Agile. And it is the opposite of a big collection of interwoven mandatory components which are a part of the previously discussed waterfall alternative. Now, Scrum promotes developing products through processes, techniques, and practices with various iterations and increments to deliver maximum value, as I had mentioned before. So that way, the first cycle of your planning, building, testing, reviewing shall be called your first iteration. The second one will be your second iteration. The third time you plan, build, test, and review will be your third iteration, followed by the fourth, and finally the fifth. Now, these iterations are called sprints. And at the end of each sprint, you have the launch of a potentially deliverable software. Each software version much better than the previous one. Each sprint takes up about 1 to 4 weeks, and you keep repeating these sprints until your product is feature complete. Sometimes you might even end up shipping your product after just the second sprint. But sometimes it may also take 3, 4, or 5, or even more sprints. But at the end of it, you have a good product, and that is what matters. Now, Scrum follows an agile approach to tackle complex problems. Now, Agile is not a methodology or framework or a process. Now, Agile promotes self-learning and self-organization as opposed to a lot of planning and a big collection of interwoven mandatory components. It implements a scientific method which replaces a programmed algorithmic approach with a more heuristic one, with respect for people and self-organization to deal with the unpredictability of complex problems. This approach basically means not planning the whole entire process to create a potentially shippable product, but to only plan enough to start out with and then react to the responses that you get with each sprint or each iteration. Now, there are 3 roles in Scrum. First of all, you have the person with the bright ideas who is the product owner. Next, you have the Scrum Master who is the one basically implementing Agile and preparing the team to follow the Agile approach and making them more efficient. And finally, you have the team. Mostly, the team consists of developers, testers, writers. It can be anything. Each of them can be replaceable by either one of them. So on certain days, you might find that developers are testing, testers are writing, so on and so forth. The main objective here is to create the product in the best possible way. There are a lot of reversible roles that are being played in the team. Now, to make you understand the approach of the Scrum Master or the Agile approach, let me take a problem statement. So take, for example, there are a number of people in the room, and they have to queue up according to their respective heights, taking as less time as possible. So there are these many people in the room. Now to this problem, there can be 2 solutions. First of all, we have the supervisor approach. Here, we have a traditional supervisor or a manager. And basically what they do is they arrange people one by one, taking up the time for each person to align themselves, which basically takes up a lot of time. And also, as a team, you learn nothing about organization. But then you have what you call the Agile approach. Here, let's bring about the same number of people, and we have a Scrum Master. Now, what the Scrum Master does is he allows the team to organize themselves And in the end, he brings about whatever changes he deems necessary. And that, my friends, is the Agile approach. Now, the Agile approach, which is mostly used for software development, is an approach under which requirements and solutions evolve through the collaborative effort of self-organizing and cross-functional teams. So basically, people here are self-organizing, which consumes less time under the continuous guidance of their Scrum Master. So what it is that it's a set of practices that promotes continuous iteration of development and testing throughout the development cycle of the project. As I had mentioned before, it promotes self-organizations and assists teams in responding to the unpredictability of the problem in hand. And the person that promotes such an approach is called the Scrum Master. He or she is a person which allows the team to self-organize and manages the process for how information is exchanged. Now, there are a few anti-patterns when it comes to the Scrum Master. First, the Scrum Master is not a supervisor. Now, this problem is quite common with people that are usually old project managers. Being a Scrum Master is completely a different role than a project manager, and therefore the way the individuals act must be completely different. Typical project managers tend to organize the work of the people instead of allowing them to self-organize. They tend to say how, by whom, and by when the work must be done, not giving the team much space to think on their own. The result of this is basically a team full of robots instead of people who have the mind to think on their own. A Scrum Master must be aware of his behavior to be able to correct it. It's not easy. Usually these people have worked for several years in a typical project management position, and simply deleting this behavior will take up some time. But being aware is the first step. Let people grow, let people have their own breathing space, and do not try to be a supervisor. It is not a control situation here. Second, the Scrum Master is not just a secretary. Now, many people think this way. In such a situation, I get extremely worried because it means that people do not know what a Scrum Master should do. When people think the Scrum Master is just a guy booking meetings, felicitating dailies, and serving coffee to their colleagues, this is where things get very dark. And unfortunately, this is very common. The Scrum Master has dozens of different roles and hats, but this is way far away from the secretary job that most companies associate Scrum Masters with. Scrum Masters teach, recruit, and coach people to grow into true leaders and work cohesively as a team. And finally, self-organization does not mean the absence of management. Like I had mentioned before, a Scrum Master is there to constantly monitor the growth of the team. Letting a team self-organize does not mean that there is nobody to supervise them. With that, let's move on to the Scrum framework. Now, Scrum is a simple, lightweight framework. It is not a methodology. Scrum implements the scientific method of empiricism, which replaces a programmed algorithmic approach with a more heuristic or a self-learning one, with respect for people and self-organization to deal with unpredictability and solving complex problems. As you can see in the graphic in front of you, it starts with the inputs from stakeholders and then the product owner with the bright ideas, all the way till the finished product, which is then reviewed in the sprint retrospective. Now, most of you might wonder what empiricism is. Now, empiricism basically means you're working in a fact-based, experience-based, and evidence-based manner. Scrum implements an empirical process where progress is based on observations of reality and not fictitious plans. Scrum also places great emphasis on the mindset and cultural shift to achieve business and organizational agility. So basically, there are three pillars to empiricism. First of all, you have transparency. Now, this means that you are presenting facts as is. All people involved, the customer, the CEO, the individual contributors, are transparent in their day-to-day dealings with others. They all trust each other and they have the courage to keep each other abreast of good news as well as bad news. Everyone strives and collectively collaborates for the common organizational objective, and no one has any hidden agenda. The next pillar of empiricism is inspection. Now, inspection in this context is not an inspection by the inspector or auditor or supervisor, but it is an inspection by everyone on the Scrum team. The inspection can be done for the product processes, the people's aspects, practices, and continuous improvements. For example, the team openly and transparently shows the product at the end of each sprint to the customer in order to gather value feedback. If the customer changes the requirements during inspection, the team does not complain, but rather adapts by using this as an opportunity to collaborate with the customer to clarify the requirements and test out the new hypotheses. And finally, as I had just mentioned, adaptation is the third and final pillar of empiricism. Adaptation is this context which is about continuous improvement, the ability to adapt based on results of the inspection. Everyone in the organization must ask this question regularly. Are we better off than yesterday? For profit-based organizations, the value is represented in terms of profit. The adaptation should eventually relay back to one of the reasons for adapting Agile. For example, faster time to the market, increased return on investment through value-based delivery, reduced total cost of ownership through enhanced software quality, and improved customer and employee satisfaction. So these were the three pillars of empiricism. Now let's go ahead and look at the Scrum life cycle. Now this slide is a graphical representation of an agile project using Scrum. Starting on the extreme left, you can see the product owner owning the backlog and developing user stories with the team or requirements for the project or the product. The product backlog is prioritized with the higher priority items on the top of the backlog. The team with the product owner then decides to group the user stories into releases based on the product roadmap. Once the release plans have been completed, the user stories are then selected for a sprint. The sprint can be from 2 to 4 weeks or sometimes 1 to 3 weeks. The team then disaggregates each user story into tasks. And then in each sprint, the product is developed. And as the code is written, it is integrated into the system. And daily scrums are held. At the end of a sprint, there is a sprint review where the working software is demonstrated and presented. Then it is presented to the customer for acceptance. The team then conducts a sprint retrospective to ask themselves the question, what could be done better? The stats on the team are then updated, as are the information radiators, which transparently displays the status of the team, which again make their way back to the user stories, and then the whole cycle begins again. Next, let's discuss what is a sprint. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, sprint is basically an iteration of planning, building, testing, and reviewing. A sprint has consistent durations throughout the development phase, and this is mostly between 2 to 4 weeks. It cannot be more than 4 weeks long. As described in the Scrum Guide, a sprint is an iteration, as I had mentioned before. It has a time box of 2 to 4 weeks, during which a product is done, usable, or potentially releasable. And by product, I mean an increment of a product, like a version of a product. Now, sprints have consistent durations, which are usually limited to 1 calendar month. Now, during the sprint, no changes are made that would endanger the sprint goal. The quality of goals do not decrease, and the scope may have to be clarified. Now, each sprint may be considered a project with no more than a month's horizon, in which you have to accomplish something. Each sprint has its own goal, a design, and a flexible plan that would guide in building it with the resultant product increment. Now, the thing with a sprint is, if the sprint's time box is too long, then the definition of what is being built may change, complexities may arise, and the risks may increase. Hence, Sprints enable predictability by ensuring inspection and adaptation of the progress towards a sprint goal at least every calendar month. Now, there are a few factors which affect the duration of the sprint. First of all, the stability of backlog. Now, obviously, if backlogs keep increasing, that may push the date of the sprint. And secondly, you have overhead costs. Now, sprints also limit risk to one calendar month of cost. If the cost increases, then it may affect the duration of a sprint. Now, overhead costs. Now, each sprint is going to have a sprint meeting, the testing phase, a review, and a retrospective. Now, these are overhead costs. Now, if the overhead costs can be reduced by planning and automation, integration, etc., these costs can be absorbed. Now, by reducing these costs, overhead costs, you can reduce the duration of the sprint. Now, it is the Scrum Master's job to make sure that the development of the product goes according to the sprint planning. Now, there are a few other sprint terminology which I want to make you aware of. First of all, you have your sprint goal. Now, as the name suggests, what you want to achieve at the end of the sprint, your product with the feature sets that you have decided with your product owner and your customer is your sprint goal. Then you have your sprint cancellation. Now, once the sprint duration has been determined and the user stories are selected, neither the duration of the sprint nor any user story can be altered. However, a sprint cancellation occurs if there is a significant change in priorities or mid-course correction in between a sprint. Considering we are only talking about 2 to 4 weeks of work, the cancellation of a sprint is highly unlikely to occur. Next, let's discuss the Scrum artifacts. Now, Scrum has 3 artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and product increment. Firstly, you have product backlog. Now, product backlog, as it is described in the Scrum guide, is an ordered list of everything that is known to be needed in a product. It is the single source of requirements for any changes to be made in the product, and the owner is responsible for the product backlog, including its content, availability, and ordering. Now, a product backlog is never complete. The earliest development of it lays out the initial known and best understood requirements. The product backlog evolves as the product and the environment in which you're going to use it evolve continuously. It is dynamic and constantly changes to identify what the product needs to be appropriate. It is competitive and useful. If a product exists, the product backlog also exists. Now, product backlog refinement is the act of adding detail, estimates, and order to items in the backlog. This is an ongoing process in which the product owner and the development team collaborate on the details of the product backlog items. During this product backlog refinement, items are reviewed and revised. Multiple Scrum teams often work together on the same product. One product backlog is used to describe the upcoming work on this particular product. Next, you have something known as a sprint backlog. Now, the sprint backlog is a set of product backlog items that are selected for the sprint, plus a plan for delivering the product increment and realizing the sprint goal. The sprint backlog is a forecast by the development team about what functionality will be in the next increment and the work needed to deliver the functionality into a complete increment. Now, the sprint backlog makes visible all the work that the development team identifies as necessary to meet the sprint goal. To ensure continuous improvement, it includes at least one high priority process improvement identified in the previous retrospective meeting. The sprint backlog is a plan with enough detail that changes in progress can be understood in the daily Scrum. The development team modifies the sprint backlog throughout the sprint. Only the development team can change its sprint backlog during a sprint. The sprint backlog is a highly visible, real-time picture of the work that the development team plans to accomplish during a sprint. Next, you have the increment. Now, the increment is the sum of all product backlog items completed during a sprint and the value of the increments of all previous sprints. At the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done. And done in Scrum has a different meaning. Done in Scrum or Agile basically means that the product must be in a usable condition and meet the Scrum team's definition of done. Now, you might think your product is done, but if that differs from my definition of done and we both are in the same Scrum team, then your product is not considered done. An increment is a body of inspectable done work that supports empiricism at the end of the sprint. Now, the increment is a step towards a vision or a goal, and it must be in usable condition regardless whether the product owner decides or not to release it. With that, let's move on to the ceremonies or events in Scrum. Now, Scrum has 4 ceremonies. First, you have sprint planning, then you have the daily Scrum, then you have sprint review, and finally, you have sprint retrospective. Now, I'm going to touch up on each of these one by one. First, you have sprint planning. Now, sprint planning is basically the plan of work to be performed during the sprint. It is time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours for 1 month or 2 hours a week. For shorter sprints, the event is usually shorter, and the Scrum Master ensures that the event takes place and attendants understand its purpose. The Scrum Master teaches the Scrum team to keep it within the time box. Now, sprint planning answers 3 major questions. First, what can be delivered in the increment resulting from the upcoming sprint? This basically discusses the advanced feature set that you are going to deliver in your upcoming version of your product. Next, how will the work needed to deliver the increment be achieved? This is where you plan what you do in the week and the week next to it. It is the Scrum Master that teaches the Scrum team to keep their work within the time box. And 3, when is your work considered done? As we discussed, the definition of done is very important to the entire Scrum team. Everybody has to agree upon a checklist on completing which your work should be considered as done. Next, we have the daily Scrum. Now, the daily Scrum is an internal meeting for the development team. It is a 15-minute time-boxed event to synchronize your activities and create a plan for the next 24 hours. It is held every day of the sprint, and the development team plans work for today and tomorrow. This optimizes team collaboration and performance by inspecting the work since the last daily Scrum and forecasting upcoming sprint work. The daily Scrum is held at the same time and place each day to reduce complexity and answers fundamentally 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And what are my impediments? By impediments, I mean challenges and requirements that you have while completing your work. It is very important that your Scrum Master know the challenges that you're facing and why you couldn't complete your work yesterday or why it might be difficult to complete your work today. The Scrum Master ensures that the development team has the meeting, but the development team is responsible for conducting the daily Scrum. The Scrum Master teaches the team to keep the daily Scrum within the 15-minute time box, and he or she also ensures that if there are others present, they do not disrupt the meeting. Next, we have the sprint review. Now, sprint review is an event to inspect the increment and adapt the product backlog if needed. There could have been a single deployment or many deployments during a sprint which lead up to that increment to be inspected. During a review, the Scrum team and the stakeholders collaborate about what was done in the sprint, and based on that, any changes to the product backlog during the sprint. Attendees collaborate on the next things that could be done to optimize the value, and this comes in the form of an informal meeting and not a status meeting. The presentation of the increment is intended to elicit feedback and foster collaboration. It is time-boxed at 1 hour a week, and the sprint review includes, first, the product owner explaining what product backlog items have been done and what has not, and two, the development team demonstrating the work that it has done. And finally, the entire group collaborates on what to do next. This is at most a 4-hour meeting for 1-month sprints, and for shorter sprints, as I mentioned, it is 1 hour a week. Finally, the aim here is so that a sprint review provides valuable input to subsequent sprint planning. The review of how the marketplace or the potential use of the product might have changed will obviously affect what is the most valuable thing to do next, and review of the timeline, budget, potential capabilities, and marketplace and competition for the next anticipated releases of the functionality and capability of the product is also discussed. The result of the sprint review is a revised product backlog that defines the probable product backlog items for the next sprint. Now, this backlog may also be adjusted overall to meet new opportunities. Finally, you have the sprint retrospective. Now, this is basically an opportunity for the Scrum team to inspect itself and create a plan for improvements to be enacted during the next sprint. This occurs after the sprint review process and prior to the next sprint planning. This is almost a 3-hour meeting for 1-month sprints, and it is time-boxed at 45 minutes a week. This is an opportunity for the Scrum team to improve, and all members should be in attendance. Now, each team member has to answer 3 questions. Firstly, what went well? This basically helps you tell your Scrum Master what went well in your previous sprint, and those practices should be enforced in your coming sprints as well. Next, what didn't work well? What were the impedances, difficulties, and requirements which weren't fulfilled in the previous sprint? And finally, what should be done differently? Here, you introduce the changes that you want in your working process or in terms of software that you're using, and these are the differences that you need to commit to improve in the next sprint. The Scrum Master encourages the Scrum team to improve its development process and practices to make it more effective and enjoyable in the next sprint. During each sprint retrospective, the Scrum team plans ways to increase product quality by improving work processes or adapting to the definition of done, if appropriate or not, in conflict with the product or organizational standards. By the end of the retrospective, the Scrum team should have identified improvements that it will implement in the next sprint, and implementing these improvements in the next sprint is the adaptation to the inspection of the Scrum team itself. Although improvements may be implemented at any time, the sprint retrospective provides a formal opportunity to focus on inspection and adaptation. With that, we've come to the end of all the Scrum ceremonies that I had to discuss.
To understand why one should become a business analyst, there should be several aspects that you should be looking into. First being the job opportunities. Well, speaking of job opportunities, in India there are up to 6,000 vacant jobs as per now, and this includes both for experienced as well as freshers. While in the US there are up to 43,000 vacant jobs. Now this data is based on data available on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, or even Indeed. Similarly, we need to take a look at the Silicon Valleys, because Silicon Valley always offers ample number of jobs. Now, speaking of Silicon Valley of India, Bangalore offers around 2,000 vacant jobs, includes freshers and experienced, while that of California offers up to 4,300 jobs. Now, again, this includes data collected through LinkedIn and Glassdoor. The next aspect which comes into your picture when you are starting your preparation to become a BI analyst would be salaries. Definitely we've got you covered here, and average salary in India comes up to 6 lakh per year, while in US comes up to $91,000 per year. Now again, this data is collected through LinkedIn and Glassdoor. Now through this, you can understand this is an average salary which includes even for freshers and until experienced. So this salary can go up to 10 lakh if you're experienced, or even beyond that. With that said, I hope this might have satisfied you to start your preparations for BI analyst. Well, if not yet, we'll go ahead in today's session and understand who is a BI analyst, why one should become a BI analyst, and further more questions. Well, the next thing that you will have in your head is who is hiring? Which are the companies, or where should I apply? Well, these are the companies that you should be applying for. Now, as you can see in the data collected here, most of the product-based companies is hiring for BI analyst. Now, you can say by this that every company which is product-based predominantly is looking for a business intelligence head. Now, what does business intelligence mean? Like I gave in the start of today's session, BI is basically applying intelligence to one's business. Now, already established service-based companies, definitely they would need BI analyst, but they would not need in such dominance because they have already established. So they need someone who can manage and go through to take forward. But while product-based company, they always need to think in innovative way, think outside the box. This is where a business intelligence analyst comes into picture, and hence applying for product-based company is always a go here. Hope that was clear. With that, let's move on to our next session, which covers as to who is a business analyst. Now, basically, like I said in the start of today's session, business intelligence analyst is someone who applies their knowledge or their experience or perhaps their intelligence into business making, into project making, into establishing new aspect in their business. So business intelligence analyst, who is also known as BI analyst, like I said, uses data and other information to help organization make sound business decisions. Now, of course, there are several aspects one has to consider in order to become a business analyst. Now, some of these aspects includes data mining, reporting, descriptive analysis, statistical analysis, data visualization, visualization analysis, querying, data preparation. Now, through all these processes, you realize that these are the tasks that has to be covered as a BI analyst. So mining of data is very important, as in when you get reports or as in when you get raw data from your clients perhaps, or even your end users, customers. You have to clean it, you have to analyze it, you have to report, make reports of it, give a descriptive analysis, statistical plot graphs, and give a visualization out of it. Now we will approach as to how we can visualize these data further ahead in the session today. So querying is important, visual analysis is important. So these are the common tasks a BI analyst have to carry on. So I hope that was clear and you got to know what a BI analyst does in a skeleton. With that, we'll understand how exactly does an organization benefit out of BI analyst. Now, there are several ways one organization can benefit. Some of the points I've covered here, which is to identify ways to increase profit. Like I said, applying intelligence to any job will always benefit them. Now, imagine you have a protocol that is being followed. What if something comes out of the box? What if something comes which you have not anticipated? That is where a business intelligence analyst comes into picture, and he will think as to how this particular situation can be handled. This is where you can increase your profits. The next thing is to analyze customer behavior. Just like I said, a customer might feel unsatisfied or dissatisfied at any given point of time. There, he might just change his requirement. And these things should, in prior, be analyzed by someone, because these things are the ones which consume a lot of time. Now, if it has been analyzed prior, it will consume time and money also, efforts perhaps. So this is where a BI analyst will come into picture. The next thing is to compare data with competitors. Now, who will do? If there is a developer and tester, he will just work on that particular product or delivering that particular product to the team. But how do you know if this product is doing good in the market? How do you know if this is beating someone else in the market. This is where a BI analyst will collect all the data and make a report out of it. The next thing is to track performance. It's not just important just to maintain your records or to reach to the customer's requirements. Sometimes the performance will break down time to time. It is important for us to keep track and maintain that balance. This is where a BI analyst will help you do that. The next thing is to optimize operations. Of course, the end operations will be maintained by the person who has created it. Now, to optimize or to give the requirements of optimization will be done by a BI analyst. You need to predict success without seeing what is the outcome or at least drafting the outcome. No one can actually work on an end product. You need to spot market trends. Now, without analyzing the market values, like we just discussed about competitors, you don't know where to stand. Perhaps what product would you make? Now, without knowing the market trends, you will not know which product you should be making to which customization. The next thing is to discover issues and problems. Definitely, with every business, every project that you encounter, there will be certain problems, be it big or small. Now, this has to be documented prior with a good intelligence. With that being understood, we will move on to our next session, which says how to become a BI analyst. Now, we have well understood who is a BI analyst, what does he do, how this will benefit an organization. So we need to understand how should we become one, because all these things can be answered only when you know how you can become a BI analyst. This is where our job description will come into picture. Now, if you go through several job descriptions, you will know and understand as to what we should be learning for. So going through these job descriptions, we will come to a conclusion of skills that we should be learning or even tools that we should be learning as a BI analyst. So let's go through the job description. Here, again, a very popular online platform, which is Disney Plus Hotstar. They are hiring for a BI analyst. Now, what are the requirements that they're saying? So I've taken a job description here where I have highlighted few points which summarizes the requirements of the person who has to be working as BI analyst. Now it says that he should be well versed in Power BI, Tableau, prepare and analyze data, data analytics perhaps. There is R, SQL, Python, good communication skills, analytical skills. Well, through this, I have summarized all the points, which goes like Power BI and Tableau is a must and should tool. You should have good analysis of data, good communication skill, which is a general one to everything. There's SQL, there's Python or R. Now, if this is not enough, we'll go ahead and see one more job description, which is Dell. Now, Dell is a popular service-based and product-based company as well. Here, I have summarized to project management. Yes, project management is also one important skill. Of course, this will not be asked in every company, but in most of the company or several companies, this could be asked. Why not be unprepared, right? Let's be prepared on every possible skill that will be asked in every kind of company as a BI analyst. There's project management, again, Power BI, Python, and SQL. As you can see, as we go ahead in several job descriptions here, Power BI, Python, and SQL stays constant. Let's see one more, which is Puma, again, another product-based company. And here again, we have Power BI, Excel, data analysis, SQL, and Python. So from this, we can conclude some of the skills that we need to become a BI analyst. So as we have come across, we need some database concepts, SQL predominantly. SQL is must and should be known by everybody who is applying for BI analyst. Excel. Now, Excel is also one more important tool that is to be known by a BI analyst. If you have good Excel skills, you can actually analyze data. Now, sometimes there are cases where people do not know any kind of data visualization tools. Did you know that these kind of data visualization can be done even in Excel? So knowing Excel is an added advantage. Analytical skills, of course, being an analyst, analytical skill is a must and should. Power BI. Now here I can go ahead and add Tableau also. The next thing is Python. Python is where you use, it is a programming language where you use for your data visualization. Now to plot graphs or even to make your analyzation of data easy, you can use Python. So usage of Python is very important. So make sure you know Python. Now, project management skills. Here, I must mention most of the skills that I mentioned here, or perhaps even every skill that I just mentioned here. We have courses for everything on our channel. I'll speak about it towards the end of today's session, but here I had to mention that be it SQL or Microsoft Excel or even analytical skills, Power BI, Python, project management also, we have course on our website. Now, if you think that you don't want to do the course, you are good enough and you just want to brush up, you can go ahead on our YouTube channel also. Like I said, I'll be speaking about it in the end of today's session. Now, moving forward, we have R language also. R again is used predominantly when you have to clean data, you have to process data, or even plot some visualizations. You need to be using R. Tableau, again, one of the data visualization tools, just like Power BI. Now, at this point, I would have to mention that here it is not just the skills. You need to be aware of certain tools as a BI analyst. Now, in the job descriptions, if you are an experienced person, there are chances that you will be asked for a tool based experience. Now, speaking of that, we will address some of the tools here. Companies use different tools. Now, here I have spoken about SAP Business Objects, DataPine, MicroStrategy, SAS BI Intelligence, there's ClickSense, there's Zoho Analytics, Sisense, and even Power BI is a tool. Now, these are some of the tools that companies predominantly use. Some of them are free, some of them have trial basis. So you can go ahead and pick any one of them, or even you can search on web and you'll find several number of BI tools. So with that, we will move on to our roles and responsibilities. Now, as a BI analyst, it is very important that you know certain roles and responsibilities prior to starting your preparation. So the first thing you need to know is you need to be learning and fully understanding the data landscape in databases and applications. So data is your king. Now everything that you have to work is in and around data. So make sure you understand and study data completely. The next thing is using and developing data collection process. Again, it surrounds around data itself. So it will be around understanding data. The next thing will be around collecting data. So everything will revolve around data itself. The next thing is reviewing and validating. Here you can understand there is a sequence or a step of responsibility that a BI analyst have to follow. The next thing is gathering end user reporting and dashboard requirements. Finally, you have to review, validate, maintain customer data as collected. Also, maintaining is very, very important. Make sure you will always maintain good data and also your projects.
Now, let us discuss BI analyst interview questions and answers. As already mentioned, they are divided into two categories, general questions and technical questions. First, let's have a look at the general questions that you may be asked. For example, you may be asked about your experience in business intelligence. Here, you should talk about your educational specialization if it is related to BI, your expertise in it, your career experience with it, and if so, you mention the field of business intelligence in which you specialize. Then describe briefly your career journey. Also remember to show a keen interest in the company's business sphere. Then you may be asked about your opinion on agile software development for BI projects. Firstly, you should define agile. Agile software development refers to the software development methodologies that involve iterative development, where requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organizing cross-functional teams. It advocates adaptive planning, evolutionary development, early delivery, and continual improvement. The benefits of Agile are that it is more collaborative, saves on time, And since the teams directly work with the client, it provides a clear outcome in an incremental way. So it is being preferred these days. But many companies still prefer using waterfall methodology, especially for projects with concrete timelines and well-defined deliverables. If you have worked in Agile, talk about your experience. Then you may be asked about your experience in SDLC. SDLC refers to Software Development Lifecycle. You should define SDLC. Software Development Lifecycle is the process used by the software industry to design, develop, and test high-quality software. It consists of a detailed plan describing how to develop, maintain, replace, and alter or enhance your specific software. You should talk about your experience in SDLC. If you don't have experience in it, you can talk about your interest in working more with it. Now, let's have a look at some examples of technical questions that you may be asked. The first, you may be asked to define business intelligence. Business intelligence is the field that aims to extract meaningful and useful insights from data. BI analysts analyze datasets and represent their insights in the form of reports, graphs, maps, summaries, cards, and other such formats. They help make strategic and tactical business decisions. Next, you may be asked about uses of business intelligence. The uses of business intelligence include that it helps improve decision making by gathering insights. It helps in studying market trends. It helps spot weak points in business operations, and it helps improve the internal efficiency of organizations. Next question, what is data flow? Data flow consists of the sources from where we extract the data and the destination where we load the data. It consists of transformations that modify and extend the data and the paths that link sources, transformations, and destinations. The three important categories in data flow are data sources, transformations, and destinations. Next question, what is control flow? A control flow consists of the tasks and containers that execute when the package runs. To control order or define the conditions for running the next task or container in the package control flow, we use precedent constraints which connect the task and the containers in a package. SQL Server Integration Services provide three different types of control flow elements, which include containers that provide structures and packages, tasks that provide functionality, and precedence constraints that connect the executable containers and tasks into an ordered control flow. What is OLAP? OLAP is an online analytical processing. It is a computing method that enables users to easily and selectively extract and query data in order to analyze it from different points of view. OLAP business intelligence queries often aid in trends analysis, financial reporting, sales forecasting, budgeting, and other planning purposes. Next, you may be asked to differentiate between OLAP and ETL tools. ETL can extract, transform using various transformations that are available in the tool and aggregate the data. The output can be used as an input for the OLAP tool. ETL is the initial part of data warehouse. While OLAP supports online reports after performing certain join operations and creating some queues. OLAP consists of various applications for scorecarding, reporting, dashboards, consolidation, planning, analysis, master data management, workspace, and foundation. You may be asked about the tools used in MSBI. There are three tools, SSIS or SQL Server Integration Services. It is useful for integrating the data coming from different data sources in a data warehouse. The number of data sources together contribute form data. SSIS is generally responsible for bulk transactions. SSAS or SQL Server Analysis Services, which is an online analytical processing tool, online analytical processing, data mining, and reporting tool used in business intelligence, while SSRS stands for SQL Server Reporting Service. Once the data is in its final state, SSRS provides the tools necessary to create reports to better understand the data. Next, what is a workflow in SSIS? A workflow is a set of instructions tell the program executor how to execute tasks and containers within SSIS packages. Next, what is the difference between where and having clause in SQL Server? Now, there can be three differences. First, having clause can be used with group by clause, while where clause is used with constructs like select, update, delete, etc. The having clause is applied as a filter after the group by clause, whereas in where clause is applied to every row in the select, update, delete, etc. construct. When both having and where clauses are used, having clause is applied after where clause to further filter the output of the where clause, while the where clause is applied before the having clause to every row in the select statement. Next, what is the difference between view and materialized view? First is the definition. A view displays a query's output as a table, while a materialized view are schema objects which can be used to summarize, pre-compute, replicate, and distribute data. Example, to construct a data warehouse. Then, all operations performed on a view will affect data in the base table and so are subject to integrity constraints and triggers of the base table. While in materialized views provides indirect access to the data table by storing the results of a query in a separate schema object. A view can be used to simplify SQL statements for the user or to isolate an application from any future change to the base table definition. A view can also be used to improve security by restricting access to a predetermined set of rows or columns. One view can be based on another. A view can also join a view with a table. While materialized views, when used for query rewrite, improve the performance of SQL execution. Next, what are the differences between truncate and delete clauses in SQL Server? Firstly, truncate is a DDL, that is data definition language command, while delete is a DML, that is data manipulation language command. Truncate removes all the records from a table without making a log entry for individual row deletion, while delete removes all or selected records from a table by making a log entry for individual row deletion. Truncate is faster while delete is slower. Truncate removes all the records from a table and the where clause or filter condition cannot be used. While in case of delete, it can remove selected records or all records based on whether where clause, which is optional, is used or not respectively. Truncate cannot be used on a table if it is referenced by one or more foreign key constraints or it is marked enabled for replication, while delete can be used in these conditions. Finally, truncate resets identity in any of the columns in a table, while delete does not reset the identity in any of the columns in a table. Next, we have the intermediate level question. First, name the components of SSAS. Now, SSAS has 5 components. First is the OLAP engine. It is used to provide fast ad hoc queries by users. Then drilling, which is the process of exploring details of the data. Pivoting is the process of switching categories of data between rows and columns. Slicing is the process of placing data in rows and columns. And the fifth component, which is dimensional database, are used in OLAP. Next, you may be asked to describe the SSAS architecture. The architectural view of SQL Server Analysis Services is based on a three-tier architecture, which consists of first the RDBMS. The data from different sources like Excel, database, text, and others can be pulled with the help of ETL tools into the RDBMS. Second, SSAS, which aggregate data from RDBMS, is pushed into SSAS cubes by using analysis service projects. The SSAS will create an analysis database, and once the analysis database is ready, it can be used for many purposes. Third, clients. Clients can access data using dashboards, scorecards, portal, etc. Coming to the next question, describe errors in SSIS. Errors generally occur due to unexpected data values when a data flow component applies the transformation to column data, extracts data from sources, or loads data into destination. Types of errors are: they occur when the connection manager cannot be initialized the connection string in case of data sources, data destinations, and control flows that use the connection string. Data transformation errors occur while data is being transformed over a data pipeline from source to destination, while expression evaluation errors occur if expressions that are evaluated at runtime perform invalid. What languages are used in SSAS? The languages used in SSAS are SQL, which is structured query language. SQL lets you access and manipulate databases. Next is MDX, which is multi-dimensional expression. It is a query language for online analytical processing using database management systems. Like SQL, it is a query language for OLAP queries. It is also a calculation language with syntax similar to spreadsheet formulas. Next, DMX or data mining extensions is a language that you can use to create and work with data mining models in SSAS. You can use DMX to create the structure of new data mining models, to train these models, and to browse, manage, and predict against them. Next, we have the Analysis Services Scripting Language, ASSL, which is an extension to XML that adds an object definition language and command language for creating and managing analysis services structures directly on the server. You can use ASSL in custom applications to communicate with analysis services over the XML protocol. Next, what is write-back? Write-back is the ability to update source systems such as databases, to maintain systems of records while staying within the context of a BI application. This is essential to the concept of embedded BI. A good BI application will enable these data updates in a secure and managed way. Next, name the business analysis enhancements available for SSAS. The business analysis enhancements that are available in Microsoft SQL Server analysis services are time intelligence, account intelligence, dimension intelligence, custom aggregation, semi-additive behavior, custom member formula, custom sorting and uniqueness settings, and dimension write-back. You may also be asked to write an SQL query. Let's take an example. To write an SQL query to extract first tuple from a cell. The SQL query for this will be select date dot calendar year dot members dot item 0 on 0 from AdventureWorks. Here AdventureWorks is the database. It will give the output of the first tuple from the set, as you can see. Next, what is a RAG hierarchy? Now, under normal circumstances, each level in a hierarchy in Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services, that is SSAS, has the same number of members above it as any other member at the same level. In a RAG hierarchy, the logical parent member of at least one member is not in level immediately above the member. When this occurs, the hierarchy descends to different levels for different drill down paths. Expanding through every level for every drill down path is then unnecessarily complicated. Now let us come to the advanced level question. Firstly, what is the difference between DTS and SSIS? DTS stands for Data Transformation Services, while SSIS stands for SQL Server Integration Services. In DTS, there is limited error handling, while SSIS provides more complex error handling. The messages in DTS, the message boxes use ActiveX script, while in SSIS, the message boxes use .NET scripting. In DTS, there is no deployment wizard, while in SSIS, we are provided with an interactive deployment wizard. In DTS, there are limited transformations, while in SSIS, there are more transformations. Finally, in DTS, there is no BI functionality, while in SSIS, there is complete integration with BI. Which lookup cache modes are available in SSIS? Now there are three lookup cache modes in SSIS. The first is the full cache mode, which is the default cache mode. Full cache mode will cause the lookup transformation to retrieve and store in SSIS cache the entire set of data from the specified lookup location. As a result, the data flow in which the lookup transformation resides will not start processing any data buffered until all of the rows from the lookup query have been cached in SSIS. Next, we have the partial cache mode. When using this, lookup values will be cached, but only as each distinct value is encountered in the data flow. Initially, each distinct value will be retrieved individually from the specified source and then cached. To be clear, this is a row by row lookup for each distinct key value. Next, the no cache mode will not add any values to the lookup cache in SSIS. As a result, every single row in the pipeline data set will require a query against the lookup source. Since no data is cached, it is possible to save a small amount of overhead in SSIS memory in cases where key values are not reused. No cache mode is not used much, but it may be used in the following cases. When the reference data is too large to reasonably be loaded into SSIS memory, the pipeline dataset is small and is not expected to grow, there are expected to be very few or no duplicates of the key values in the pipeline dataset. How to log SSIS execution. SSIS includes logging features that write log entries when runtime events occur. They can also write custom messages, although it is not enabled by default. Integration services supports a diverse set of log providers, giving you the ability to create custom log providers. The integration services log providers can write log entries to text files, SQL Server Profiler, SQL Server, Windows Event Log, or XML files. Logs are associated with packages and are configured at the package level. Each task or container in a package can log information to any package log. The tasks and containers in a package can be enabled for logging even if the package itself is not. How do you deploy SSIS packages? Now there are two ways in which the SSIS packages can be deployed. The first way is that the SSIS project build provides a deployment manifest file. After running this file, you can deploy it to either the file system or the SQL server. The second method is to import the package from SSMS from file system or SQL server. Next, to create a calculated member that intersects all measures, where do you put it and why? Now, in MDX, you can create a calculated member, which is a member based on other members. You can create two different kinds of calculated members, ones that are measures and ones that are not. Remember that a measure is considered to be a member of the measure's dimension. To create a calculated member that intersects all measures, you would put it in a dimension other than measures, because a member in a dimension cannot intersect its own relatives in that dimension. Next, what is the use of property called non-empty behavior while creating a new member in a cube? Non-empty behavior is used for ratio calculation. An MDX expression will return an error if the denominator is empty, just as it would if the denominator were equal to 0. By selecting one or more measures for the non-empty behavior property, we're establishing a requirement that each selected measure first be evaluated before the calculated expression is evaluated. If each selected measure is empty, then the expression is also treated as empty and no error is returned. How are cubes implemented in SSAL? As multi-dimensional cube or hypercube is a data structure in SQL Server Analysis Services, that is SSAL, which is built using OLA-basis databases to allow near instantaneous analysis of data. The useful feature of an OLAP cube is that the data in the cube can be in an aggregated form. SSAS cubes are created in a step-by-step process using the cube wizard. This brings us to the end of today's session. I hope now you have a better understanding of business intelligence analysis and the interview questions